You are now entering Maximum Driftcast, the only drifting podcast hosted by a Spanish soccer mom, a 30-year-old silver-haired fox going on 60, and finally, a 200-pound bowl of spaghetti with chimichanga arms.
The champions, we are the champions.
Welcome to Maximum Driftcast, el único podcast en internet que será transmitido 100% en español.
Well, Sam, in case you forgot, we did hit our Patreon, so Paco might have to do a whole show in Españoles.
I figured that maybe we could reserve that for a later episode when we weren't talking to
Oh,
the Drift
boy, I
Papas.
forgot these guys were
What's
here.
going on? Sam looks like he's like the Brady Bunch intro on TV. Like, there was a Driftcast
I don't understand.
with Jim Liaw, because you ever seen?
Oh, because there's so many peeps on here.
And Ryan Sage was joining
Him
it
and
as
two,
well.
Yep.
No, finish the song. Keep going. There's
Keep
like
going.
15 more verses.
He was
right?
They
doing
used to
CrossFit, then he lifted a bunch of weights, and then Sam smells like sauerkraut.
All right, that's pretty good, actually.
For those who don't know, Sam just landed
yeah, so-
from Germany. Sam,
Yep.
How you doing?
Hopped on a plane from Germany at 10 a.m. this morning, and then just landed like 15 minutes ago, essentially. But we're here because it's a very special show. This is our kind of, I don't want to say annual because it's like semi-annual, but we always talk to the Drift Dads right after the season. We'll probably talk to them again right before 2019 season. But Ryan Sage, Jim Liaw, the the dads of Forming the Drift. So welcome to the show once again, gentlemen.
What's going on?
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
You're a rock star. You've been up for like 30 hours.
You guys are rock stars for waiting and deciding to talk to us about all the silly drift things this late at night. But thank you again. And let's just get started. What is drifting to you guys? No, don't do that. No. I think we've done that joke too many times.
Yeah.
But we have so many new things to talk about. You guys made some big announcements at SEMA. I don't know. I think we should talk about the 2018 season, though, because it was a crazy season altogether. Let's just get into it. What do you guys think? Are you happy with the season? Are you sad? Are you neglected? Do you need something from us? How are you?
You can go first, Jim.
Look, we'll start with the bad. I think, aside from 3 thunderstorm warnings in a row, the last 3 rounds, which is killer for us, and it was chaotic. No, we ended the season was awesome. I mean, who would have thought? We thought, James ran away with it halfway through, and lo and behold, we go down and come down to Irwindale and separate the championship by 4 points. It was amazing. I haven't seen. I was in the announcers booth with Ryan and Jared. Haven't seen those two get that crazy in a long time. It was mayhem in there.
I think this was my favorite season of Formula Drift that I've had the pleasure of attending or watching. What about you guys, Paco? Corey?
Oh, dude, especially the last round.
Yeah. Everyone was saying that Irwindale is the best round of drifting that they have ever seen, arguably. Because, like you said, the we as Irwindale always never ceases to surprise and astonish with what is possible there. I remember, being playful with James at like Texas, or not Texas. What was before Texas?
St. Louis.
Yeah. Be like, yeah, man, you've got this in the bag. Like, congrats. He's like, oh no, I'm not sure I have it yet. I'm like, well, let's, you can be all humble and nice, but like, you've got this in the bag. Congrats. And sure enough, he almost didn't have it in the bag in a very astonishing chain of events. And what really mattered at the end there is that USA won. Yeah, we finally showed those no good Irish Norwegians that, we're not out of the race yet. We may be out of the championship points, but seeing Vaughn come back was an incredible sight to see.
Not to mention, I think we already claimed James Dean as part of US.
No, we I hired Osbo. I told him that he was driving for USA that day.
Oh, he was like, yeah.
You guys know that the key to any good writer or entertainer is to write a script out that takes you down a certain road, gives you a red herring, takes you down a certain kind of road, thinks that you're going to be able to predict what's going to happen, and then at the very end, when you think you know what's going to happen, delivers a Game of Thrones style type blow to crush your dreams. So that was done very deeply in the writing room. We worked hard on that one, and we're glad that everybody really appreciated it.
Yeah, good. It's fun that we can still make that joke about
yes,
the staged writing, the WWE of motorsports, but it's one of those things like you can't really write something that crazy, especially with cars being cars and working the way they work, and Peter and Dean both getting knocked out in top 16, which has never happened, I don't think, in the entire existence of them being a team. But it was quite the show. But you guys mentioned the rain. The rain was prevalent at every round. I feel like it's been that way for a few years now, but this year especially, we had the superstorm at St. Louis, and there's not really anything to be done about that, of course. But what would you do to address that in the future?
Well, I mean, it wasn't even just the U.S. rounds. We actually had rain, really heavy rain, typhoons in Japan as well on every single round. So drifting in general, at least for our brands, was pretty much plagued with weather. I think the takeaway from that is that, it didn't seem to deter fans too much, and the timing of it was just about right. It got a little bit scary there on Friday at Irwindale. That was completely unpredictable, especially at that time of the year. You typically don't see that, but like you said, there's not a lot you can really do about it. You just kind of hope and pray that people will come out and people are not weather weary. But it definitely makes for very interesting drifting, as it did in Pro 2 on Friday night.
So what's the official? Because we all know that drifting in the rain sucks. What's the official on the books policy for whether we run in the rain? Is it just kind of gray and we decide as a case by case basis? And how do we decide when the show goes on and when we hold?
I mean, water on the ground is assessed by the staff. So between Kevin and race control and the track staff, we have to assess how much standing water is on the ground and what's safe, what's not. And we can't get caught up in the, this is boring to watch, or this is less exciting, or whatever it may be. If it's safe and it's able to run, we usually will run. The tricky thing with this year was, we haven't had it before, is an actual lightning strike. So we've kind of upgraded how we are monitoring that, and then really we learned a lot too, the difference between lightning that's in the air and the lightning strike, which touches the ground. Once it touches ground, then we have to worry about things like metal structures and grandstands and the judging tower that spotters and our staff are in, and have to clear that out. And there's a standard protocol and policy to do that. So it's a little bit of chaos, but it's somewhat organized chaos. We got to clear people out. We got to watch the radar. We got to make sure that there is no more lightning strikes within a certain radius, and then we put people back. And so we saw the delay in St. Louis. We saw the delay in Texas, and then I believe we didn't have to do that in Irwindale, but it was getting close. So. Yeah. Unfortunately, those are the things, and we kind of put pause and hopefully wait it out. I think in the past we've rushed. Once there's a little bit of like moisture in the air on the ground, we start scrambling. I think we've improved how we handle that from years past. So we were tested the last 3 rounds.
Texas kind of created something special, and we mentioned it on the show after Texas. I wasn't there, unfortunately, but the other guys that were there said it was kind of interesting and cool to see the Pro 2 finals run during the Pro 1 competition. And it's kind of a fun, we said it's a fun incentive for Pro 2 drivers, not that they're not trying hard anyways, but to get to the finals, you get to have the big audience. You get to have the Pro 1 crowd. You get to have the Pro 1 excitement. And I mean, have you guys thought about doing that seriously? Is it too many possibilities to slow down the actual Pro 1 show, or what's your take on all that?
Funny enough, we're working through that now. We had a town hall. Coincidentally, let me improve my English. No, we talked about it at the town hall at Irwindale. Some of those were the topics, but like anything else, it's not a simple, let's just move them to Saturday and then that's it. There's so many moving pieces that go along with that. Practice time, things like that, and even just our staffing alone. Putting guys on track to run a top 16 competition, then a short break, and then a 32 car competition. I mean, that's kind of crazy. So we have to take that into consideration as well. But we're looking to see how feasible that is. It was interesting to be able to see that in Texas. Don't know if we are able to implement that in 19, but we're exploring it nonetheless.
Yeah, I think if I were to take a look back at this year, I think there was a lot of exciting moments, but also I think there's a lot of highlighted drivers that stood out this year that we really haven't seen them drive that way or as consistent as they have been this year.
On both Pro and Pro 2.
Yeah, so obviously like Justin Pollock was a dude that stood out this year big time, being the dude who qualified probably number one the most out of most people. Matt Field doing well on the Corvette, getting a podium. Chelsea Denofa being a monster in the Mustang. And then obviously Dye getting back up in points. Gucci have a good year. Forrest podiuming.
Reaching level 40 of Pokemon.
Yep. So I think outside of just the overall event, I think we're seeing another development wave of these drivers that are just continually increasing, which I didn't think was possible, the talent and ability of what the sport is bringing in as a driver now. I think.
I don't want to use the word. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, for me, we talked a lot. One of the main threads this year was how were the teams going to react to Wordhouse, right? And it was pretty apparent last year that those two guys at any given moment, especially James, were going to be the two best guys on track, and everybody else was more or less playing catch up. And that's kind of what happened in the 2012 year when Daigo came in, basically kind of reworked how judging was going to function, how drifting was going to function, what looked impressive, what appealed to people's intuitions when they saw driving on the track. And I think we saw a lot of that in the first year with James and Peter. And so the second year, this year, was really about trying to see if the rest of the field was going to learn enough to peel some of that back. And I think we saw that in a number of instances. Those guys were still incredible. They were great. James was phenomenal. Peter had moments where he was absolutely brilliant, but we did see a lot of the field really take the guys to task and push the competition to another level, and to the point where, as we talked about before, it goes down to the last battle, and you emphasize Vaughn, and I think Vaughn in particular at that particular round found another gear. So whatever they did, whatever they're doing in order to learn what to do against those guys, you saw the development there. And it may not have happened right out of Long Beach, but it certainly changed, I think, the dynamic of the season, where many different guys could be on the podium at the end of the night, and also win events. And so I thought that was a pretty cool development.
Yeah, interesting to think though that the answer to Daigo was a little less subtle. It was Daigo shut up with 1,200 horsepower, so it's time to take all the 500 horsepower cars and make them 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower. And that had grand effects all across the board. Many of them poor for the next few seasons. But then this one is a little. The reaction to Wardhouse has been more subtle, because we've seen the guys come and bring the Wardhouse drivers to task to some degree. James still ran away mostly with victories this year. But what do you think the drivers did to compensate for the Dean effect?
I think a lot of it, in my experience in talking to people and talking to Kevin, I think a lot of it is really in vehicle dynamics. I think the one thing that really helps the Wardhouse team is they basically have arguably the best chassis. There's no real limitations from them on OEs or on parts, and they can basically build the perfect drift machine. And they have a great tire. So all those things put together, and the fact that you have somebody like James and Peter, who are phenomenal drivers in themselves, you put all that together, it's going to be really hard to beat. And a lot of the other teams, from what I saw and what I heard, is that it really is about understanding their own vehicle dynamics and what it's going to take to be as consistent with it as they can in areas of judging that the judges have deemed to be important. So I think that's probably one way to answer that.
Yeah, and I want to elaborate.
I think
Go ahead,
to
Jim.
add to that, though, is that we've talked about this for quite a while in terms of pairing the consistency of a driver and the consistency of the vehicle. I mean, look at the first season of James. There was almost zero mechanical failure with the car. Couple that with James being a great driver.
Unless he was going up against Peter in the finals, because there seemed to be a couple times there where James is transmission or drivetrain in some way suffered in the last battle against little boy Peter.
Yeah, I mean, look and this year was that some of the the lower finishes for James were mechanical failure issues. So whether it's wear on the car, whether it's the current power plant and they need to freshen up the car or whatever, but I think overall, because the level of the driving and the car builds have escalated, when you look at the season as a whole, I think it may seem like, oh yeah, James, Frederick, they kind of took it over. But as you guys were just talking about, I mean, if you look at all the drivers that did so well this year, if you were able to go back event by event and kind of peel back the podium, the top four finishes, it is quite a diverse group of drivers that did well this year. So it's that type of level. When you have people driving at a higher tier, it raises everybody. And I think all the teams have kind of risen their level.
One thing to definitely point out too that we brought up a lot on the show before too is Forsberg, in that he kind of quietly got fourth place there with a car that didn't work properly a single round for the most part. So you talk about the domination of Dean and Osmo, and granted, Forsberg has been a dominator in the series for many years now, but I feel like I at least counted him out a lot this year just because his car was broken, but he still came in fourth, so it'll be interesting to see what someone like him will do with a working car. And then JTP, if he keeps up the momentum, is really going to be up there as well with the fighting of Dean and Peter. And we saw Forrest kind of, I don't want to say easily take out James, but we've always known that Forrest was a S-chassis master, but the way that he did take out James Dean kind of in a clear decision was surprising to see James knocked out like that. But he's no longer the undisputed king, I would say, even though he is now back-to-back champion. I think it's going to be a lot harder going forward.
Well, I also think a lot of the drivers and teams now are finding the secret recipe that James and Peter has, which is simplicity and consistency. And the simplicity in itself is just the team operation, the vehicle built, and management, right? You talk to these guys, and they're literally going through the car, and it's like, hey, this is a 3-liter 2JZ. A lot of these guys are going 3.4s, bigger, stroking, and they know that, hey, we have a better chance of winning if we're spending more time on track than in the pits. And I think that analogy is what people were adapting to rather than trying to wind their cars up so much to be fast when it's like, we know what the outcome's going to be and there's more risk to that. So we want to spend more time on the track. How do we do that? And it's just creating more of a simplistic vehicle and management of that vehicle. The teams now, I think a lot of credit goes to the teams because now a lot of the guys, especially going to the pits, it's like they have more of a routine, right? I think there's a lot more organization and structure compared to what we've seen in the past, where it was like everybody kind of did everything, and now there seems like there's more roles and organization within the teams themselves. And I think the most complicated car that's in the series this year still is Federico, and he's slowly figuring that out. But it's like now you have 1 out of 34 cars that are complicated, while the other guys are obviously contenders at this point. And we always talk about this before. There's no easy battle anymore, right? Top 32 on, you're going to be going against somebody that's going to take you out, guaranteed, or can. And I think it's going back just knowing that they can hop into a car that actually works. And I think that is the biggest takeaway is we're in a weird, crazy point of the sport where I think the driving's only get better now. I think we got over a hump, and now we're going to see a lot more crazy competition this next year.
And look at out of the I don't know how much off-season or mid-season driving Peter did, but look at the top 4, right? Between James and Frederick and Chris, how much driving in the series, outside of the series, off-season, in between rounds that they were doing. They were honing their craft. They were keeping themselves busy. They were keeping, they had other obligations, but they were driving a lot. And so when they walked into a Formula Drift round, they were not out of sync. They were not, dusting the dust off, kind of, walking in. They were walking in, fresh and on point, and having come off of probably the previous weekend driving somewhere else. So I think that helped them.
Definitely. Field is definitely one of the guys that drove in China a lot, and really exciting to see him campaign a new car, a Corvette, and do it really well. And I'm sure that I think every other driver in the series has now said, like, yeah, I'd love to build a Corvette, which is exciting to see a new American-made car do really well in the series. And its not debut year, because there's been Corvettes in the series before, but this one was a big change for him, and showed that it could be powerful, which is fun. Right. Also, talking about writing, I love that you guys wrote out that Matt Field, driver number 777, would get 7th place. Chelsea Denofa, who we already know you guys always choose to score him 88 in qualifying, ranked 8th this year. Just like, it's fun to throw those little writing aspects in, guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, one other thing that I thought was interesting, just because you pointed it out, but I think if I remember correctly, the first 4 rounds were 4 different winners, right? We had, It was Osbo, then Forsberg, then Blues, and then James didn't win a round until round 4. So we saw this real great diversity of people winning events where the championship was really kind of up in the air till halfway through the season. James went on a little bit of a run with those 2 back-to-back wins in Jersey and in Monroe. And then Osbo slowly fought back. We had Peter winning Texas. Yeah, that's right. And obviously Irwindale went down the way that it did. But yeah, I think, to encapsulate again, it was just an incredible season overall. We're really happy to still see fans excited to come out to events, even with weather. And the drivers are really the ones that should be applauded here, because I think the competition is as good as it's ever been. And I agree with you, Corey, that there's definitely a progression level that has happened within the past 2 seasons, especially last season, that I think the guys that we talk a lot about, Denofa, Field, Odie, Dye, Gucci, Turk, all those guys in the top 10, they're taking it to a whole new level. And, it's going to be really exciting to see how things go from here.
And I think judging this year, there weren't really any standout calls.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because it seems like not only the drivers, but also Formula Drift as a whole, it's running a lot more smooth, including the judging. Like I can't remember like a lot of like questionable calls.
There wasn't really any questionable calls too, and we've been talking about it with you guys in the show since we started the show and started talking to you guys. Is like, how do we get some more aids out there for the judges, whether it's different cameras, whether it's different in-car telemetry. But this year, like, we didn't really need that, I don't think. Like, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't maybe have that at some point still, but there was nothing that I felt was really left on the table as a result of not having that data, so to say.
Yeah, I think overall the general consensus, and obviously we don't have every single fan being polled about how the judging is, nor would that really be scientific, because you just don't really know how people are going to respond.
Most fans aren't neutral either, so when Jared is like, do you think so-and-so won, do you think so-and-so won, or you want to see it one more time, they always yell one more time. I mean,
silly
like,
fans,
even if it's a very clear
silly fans
guy.
Yeah, I think the if you go by the consensus of how much overall complaining there was with drivers, that was definitely very, very minimized. And even with fans, like you said, that, have their favorites. I think this was probably the lowest year of that. I don't think that means that you just become complacent and stop there. I mean, one of the things that I learned recently, though I knew that this was kind of controversial, was one particular run that actually I think the fans really liked. And the judges went that direction as well, but having given it closer analysis and having somebody point out some things to us about certain vehicles and the way that they react and the way suspension is set up and some of the things that can be observed from a vehicle dynamic standpoint, and also, judging how this particular run actually played out, I could have seen one call that I thought was very much in favor of what the fans thought, go in a direction that would have been more justified in terms of the way that a bit of contact actually happened at a particular event, and it was pointed out to us by. Sorry, go ahead.
Which battle is this? Before you go further.
I don't know if I should say if I disturb the pod, but let's just say two drivers that definitely get spoken about a lot at a particular round. And the point is that when I had this kind of explained to me, and I always knew that it could have gone both directions. It was one of those ones where intuitively you said, if it goes this way, I get it. But if it goes that way, I get it as well. And you could make a case for either side. This one happened to be the popular case, and I think everybody kind of felt good about that. But I could have seen it going the other direction and have it been, relatively argued well that it could have gone that other direction. And so I think, when you do that and you go back through events and you have the judges kind of lay out their reasons why they voted for things, even if a judge is not in the majority, right? Those are the really important ones. Like, why did a certain judge not go with the other two? Why did he go the opposite direction? And can we understand a little bit more about how his thinking worked there? And was there something that seemed like an adequate justification for his vote, or was there just too much of too far afield of the other two judges? So I think that's really important, because sometimes, you see results that seem counterintuitive. You see driver A, driver B, right? You see that sometimes. And I think for a lot of fans, even though it might have just been the scale tipped that direction enough for those two guys, so where they didn't want to go one more time, and the same thing for the other judge, but he went the other direction. I think you want to have a deeper dive on those to kind of understand how the judges' minds are working in regards to that.
And it's always been nice to have, I think it's been 2 years now that we've had Lontaine talking on mic now about judging calls, and I think that has been a very helpful explanation point, because at least even if you don't agree with them, you still understand why they're saying what they're saying in accordance with the rule book. Yeah,
I think single-handedly that has been the best thing that we've done to improve the communication, because as much as people are listening to Jared and I give analysis, I don't think it holds as much water as actually coming from the horse's mouth, especially if
you just called Lontaine a horse, dude.
Yeah.
If the horse's mouth is the one that voted in a certain direction, right? If he has to pick up the reason why somebody else voted another direction, it makes it a little bit more complicated, and maybe you don't get the full-throated response that you want. And I think that's something that we should think about. But it does help a lot when the answer that he's giving is what the result was.
Yeah. Any other further questions on topic of judging stuff, Corey, Paco?
Well, definitely. I mean, how many years is it? It's the second year since Ryan Lantang is doing the explanation.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, just definitely big tool. Like a lot of people definitely have.
Are you
shown.
calling Ryan a big tool?
He's a horse and I he's a tool. God. What else do you have to write? He's Canadian next? What?
Yeah, well, I mean, he is. No, but I mean, definitely.
what's that?
I'm just saying, like, I mean, from the fans, because I've been like reading and like checking out like fan comments about that, and they definitely seem to get it. They're like before that, they were kind of like left in the dark, like they didn't really know a lot of what was going on. So
Well, I think the most unique thing about this sport is you guys probably have the most diehard fans that are dedicated to specific drivers, and so even if a driver, their favorite driver, has a terrible run, obviously they're going to be shouting and screaming that their driver should win no matter what, which is awesome to have diehard fans like that. But prior to Ryan, obviously they have no reason or knowing why it swung that way. So I think obviously the education that the fans are getting are making them better, more knowledgeable fans. So when their favorite driver runs, it's not all hell breaks loose. There's an understanding saying, I can see that. And I think that's been the biggest goal, is how do we make our fans better fans and make them more knowledgeable so they can understand with maybe out explanation down the road, because there's a basic criteria that they see so often that is very understandable.
yeah.
Yeah, I think one philosophy that we have with judging, it's one that I support, is that the first priority with regards to who you should be satisfying is the drivers, and a very, very close second is the fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fans, it should be based off of their intuitions on what they see, and you hope that those intuitions are informed by the tools that you're giving them, the explanations and so forth. And for the drivers, it's really about, are the judges being consistent with what they said in the drivers meeting?
Right.
And if they're not being consistent with what they said in the drivers meeting, then we have a problem. But if the majority of drivers say, you know what, I see why they went that way because they said X, Y, and Z in the drivers meeting, they're being consistent with that, then I think we've satisfied the first part. And then the second part is that you have so many new fans that are coming into sport all the time. We have to make the sport as complicated as it is in terms of judging, make it as easily accessible when somebody walks in. And that's going to be, what people are talking about when they're appealing to their intuitions. Like, I just saw a run, I think XYZ driver should have won. And if they're misinformed, then we need to go through a process of education. But as you said, I think so many of the fans are so diehard and hardcore that a majority of them kind of understand where the criteria is at the moment.
Yeah,
I think that's why it's like it's not that it's low hanging fruit because it's not important, but I think as everybody's been talking about technology and aids and things that can be added to enhance the judging, I think the first hurdle has always been education and understanding. Why is judging done this way? What's the criteria that judges are looking for, and being able to articulate that. And that's why you guys have said that with the addition of a judge as an additional commentator to explain their perspective about what's happened, to have before it was just Jared, and then it became Jared and Ryan. So that added another layer of dynamic, not just an excitement in terms of the play-by-play, but there was more dialogue, there's more discussion, there's more understanding and education about the sport. And I think if we can, there's so much work to be done there first, even before adding all these aids into it. You can't bring in all these bells and whistles to things if the foundational base of what the criteria of the competition isn't there. And if people don't understand that, fans don't understand that, then adding all kinds of gimmicks to it doesn't necessarily make it any better.
Right. And I think there was a period there, I want to say it was 2012 or 13, where it was very complicated. Understanding what was happening on track was very complicated, with a tire being a zero or a cone knocking a cone may have been a zero.
The year of the hard zeros.
Yeah, it was, and I think that was a year of a disconnect, because I don't think people were comprehending what was going on for such a small foul, that there was this big repercussion of of scoring or an issue of scoring based off a tiny flaw, which obviously has been fixed since. And I think it's made it more easier to understand for the fan. So we see this growth and this evolution, obviously taking speed out of the equation as well, has really made things a lot more technical, I think, driver-wise. So I think, just spectator-wise and a fan-wise, I see this sport progressing in a direction where it's easily understandable, and I think it's getting tailored to a point where you can bring a new guy to a Formula Drift event, and the excitement from a guy watching drifting for the first time, that excitement is typically going to sway towards the winner based off of the criteria that we're now providing. Right? I could bring a guy or my grandma into a Formula Drift event and watch this.
Guys and grandmas only.
Well, what I'm saying is I could bring my grandma to the event and watch this guy do an amazing qualifying run, and she'd probably stand on her feet and start applauding because of how close he got to the wall or how he filled the. I think it's very easy to digest now rather than looking at 30 other different variables. Yeah. And obviously in past history, bringing up aids, and we've seen what the DOS system is doing to other forms of drifting and things like that, where it's taking that aspect out of it. It's what a computer wants to see, not what the fans and judge want to see. And I think that's what's hurting drifting. And I can even say that's probably what's been hurting or killing D1 is it's taking away that ooh-ah factor rather than this data log.
Because if you think about it, like right now, it is harder to win just based on you having a better car. You know what I'm saying? Like now it is really like everybody can put a dent on somebody's career. I mean, you saw Van Kirk with a very basic low horsepower car still running pretty hard. So, it's actually the criteria to judge the runs. It seems to be like perfectly dialed into exactly this is what we want to see. This is what you guys have to do. So, if somebody shows up with a 2,000 horsepower drift car, he's not gonna win. Which maybe that's one of the reasons why Daigo did back then. Because he showed up with an insane car and nobody could keep up.
Well, the criteria was different.
The criteria was different, exactly. So that's what I'm saying.
You also run away from a driver then and get.
So now the criteria it's made in a way where there's no way of getting away with it. Like there's nothing you can do. Like I'm just gonna put more power secretly. You're like, well, you're gonna run out of tires. Or I'm just gonna put more weight, and you're gonna need to get a bigger tire. Now you guys gonna be more grippy, and I think on its 15th year, this is the 15th year, right?
Almost old enough to drive Formula D.
Yeah,
getting your permit.
This 15th year, it's definitely getting pretty dialed in.
I want to point out
real quick before we get too far off it. We're talking about judging aids, and you'd be, I imagine, crazy not to heavily research continuing this for every other round, considering the awesome reaction you had from the FPV drone. And just from a spectator standpoint and live stream standpoint, it has been awesome to see that at Irwindale with our buddy Johnny flying the drone very close to the cars in a live way. But do you see that being used as a judging tool as well? Because you can kind of get an angle that none of the other stationary camera positions can get.
Yeah, I mean, this topic of conversation, I think, is a primary one that we have, and I'll say my bit, and then Jim can say what he wants to say. I think that the more production value that we can put into the feed, and the feed, I mean, there by what goes to the Jumbotron being the same as the live stream in terms of what the fans get to experience in terms of camera shots, angles, all that kind of stuff, creates not only a better overall experience, but almost by necessity, once you put something into the feed, it can in principle be used as a judging tool. Now we have to be careful about that because we don't, the way that our protest rules are written right now, we have to be careful about what stuff we're capturing and how it could actually be used. But if you constrain that and you just take a look at, say, what we did at Irwindale, I would see no reason not to continue that, and obviously to try to amplify it. We just, we're really close with Johnny. We think he's an incredible FPV flyer. And I think the technology for that, especially at speed, is coming along. Like we use V1 technology, but there's better technology that's coming out that will actually hopefully be able to help us get a better transmission and actually fly farther away if possible. And so really the only limitation becomes, how fast can the drone fly relative to the cars.
Yeah, I was wondering about that at certain events. I was talking because we actually did a shoot with Johnny a few days after that with Tanner, and I was asking him it works at a track like Irwindale, but these tracks for Atlanta where we have a 100-mile-an-hour entry, like he can't chase him down a hill, I guess, but he could just pop in later in the track. You just can't use it as like also because he's a very dialed flyer, but there's sometimes you get ahead of the cars because the drones, once they start moving, they're harder to slow down. So it's like it can't be a fully 100% reliable tool. It's like, yeah, we can use it if we have it, but not every run is going to be from the same angle. There's going to be certain aspects of the runs missed and all that. So I'm curious to see how that could be used competition-wise, not just entertainment-wise.
And the other thing I wanted to point out that I wanted to wrap up on is the driver knowledge, right? I think we're seeing drivers doing things that we haven't seen them do as far as strategies and driving techniques and adapting to other drivers. And one moment that really stands out to me out of this whole year was Chelsea Denofa at Irwindale. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but Chelsea Denofa, after every single run, was running through the water puddle at the end of the track.
Which wasn't intended that's for drag racers.
You know what I mean? But there's these crazy thought processes that are now happening in the drivers to find ways to get advantage. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but what he was doing was literally cooling down the tires to get more run time out of them. And he told me, I talked to him off air, that he could get another half a lap out of those set of tires by cooling them down. So you're seeing, once again, these little things that drivers are doing to try to get that a little edge because it is so tight. So once again, I think we're going to see more in the future of the drivers just getting better. I think we have a great foundation, a great baseline going into 2019. It has to be one of the best years, or is going to be the best year of drifting after what we're coming off of with such a tight championship and coming through Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Dirk Stratton winning that. And I think we're in for a big treat next year.
Was that puddle just kind of inadvertently there?
Yeah, because then it rained.
That was a leftover of the rain.
Yeah, it was leftover of the rain.
I mean, is that something that, like, I know they do at Englishtown, like when you're doing hot laps there, they have a big water puddle, so you can intentionally do that. Is that something that drivers have requested, or is anyone interested in that being an official feature?
It's interesting. It was something that the entire competition staff was watching and monitoring and discussing as we were watching Chelsea do that. And then obviously we saw Vaughn follow suit as well. Is it something we're adding? I don't know, but we definitely see the strategy in that. And, we have to assess the pros and cons of something like that.
Smart.
I mean, it's like if your car is NA or turbo and you take advantage of the weather being colder or being on a higher altitude, I mean, that's circumstantial. It's like an F1. There's drivers who are better driving on rain. They actually like driving on rain because they just lap everybody. So I guess that's just part of the game, right? Like just taking advantage of whatever is.
Only smart drivers or only knowledgeable drivers are able to understand that and take advantage of that. And I think, obviously, in road racing and other forms of motorsports, it's kind of breeded into any opportunity you get, take it.
Yeah.
And drifting has really had no background prior to 16, 17 years ago, right? So
there's still a lot of learning.
There's still a lot of learning, and there's still a lot of growing because it is, once again, it's still at we're getting our learner permit phase. Wait till we turn 16, 17 and we're driving.
Once we turn 18, then
we're smoking cigars
and start buying
and
cigarettes
drinking
and
beer.
porn.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. 21, we'll start having beers while we drive.
Yeah, for sure.
Bind themselves love and as well.
So you guys announced schedule stuff at SEMA. What was there's not any major changes to the schedule that I could tell, but we don't have Pro 2 at Irwindale anymore. What was the idea? I thought it was pretty successful this year. Granted, the track was brutal to a lot of the drivers. Some of that had to do with rain. But what was the criteria for choosing which rounds got Pro 2 and which ones didn't?
Yeah, announcing the schedule is something that everybody kind of waits for at SEMA or a little bit prior to, and we've concluded the 15th season. We can't drop and add and test run venues. I think we've established some pretty good relationships, long-term ones, like Irwindale, like Road Atlanta, that's been around since day one, and we're building the market. So we're not really in that type of appetite to like, hey, we're going to swap things around. Now, with the consideration of Pro 2, it's partly it's also logistics. You know, zigzagging them from one corner of America to another corner. We try not to do that because obviously this is the up and coming series, and it's about space. There's some tracks that just have more space and some don't. I was a proponent of adding Pro 2 to Irwindale. We really wanted them to conclude the season with the pro guys and to go into the banquet and all that and the festivities there. But with the obviously with the drama and the changes that happened at Irwindale over the offseason, one of the things that were given up is half the paddock went away. And it went away for trailer storage from the logistics company next door. The venue operators got a decent payday for that, and that helps keep the track afloat. And that was one of the issues of the previous leaseholder, was that they couldn't keep up with the rent. So they had to do that to sustain the facility and keep it operating. So we saw the logistical difficulties for us. We had to put Pro 2 in kind of that parking lot paddock, and it just didn't really work out. The flow wasn't what we wanted, and though it was cool to have them there, we thought we would shuffle that a little bit, and we brought Pro 2 back to Orlando, and so it'll be Orlando, Atlanta, and then a break, and then St. Louis and Texas.
That makes sense. And now that we've got the St. Louis round that was pretty good last year, and the track seems to be a very interesting track to drift, we've kind of fulfilled that need of not having a event in that area. What is the next unfulfilled track need that you'd like to start looking at from here?
I don't know if it's an unfulfilled track need. I think it's more of, as the series grows, and the unfortunately it goes down to a lot of the logistics part of it, is that, as the paddock grows, as teams and their setup grows, and hopefully sponsors and their activation grows, we have to look for venues that can house that. Some are reaching capacity. So going into, I think right now, it's more about 2020 in terms of what the schedule and what the venues look like. There's potentially 2 that have logistical issues. So we have to get ahead of it, and we're already starting to kind of scour the country, talking to a lot of tracks, talking about the cost to go there, about, again, kind of the layout challenges. Is it a good drift track? Does it have enough paddock space? Does it have enough seating, parking? All that comes into play with us. We're not, just track day where if you just find a place that has a good course configuration and we can run, it's not that simple. And so we have to spend a lot of time to find the right place.
Gotcha. And is there any consideration to stadium drifting in America? Something we've talked about.
I wanted to bring that up so bad, Sam. You guys had a chance to go to Drift Masters and check that track out, and then you're looking at Forsberg and Matt Field. They're at D1 China right now, and they're doing a stadium there too. What is the hold up?
Corey wants to see some flamethrowers. He wants to see some monster truck halftime shows. What's
T-shirt
up?
cannons.
I get it. We can defunct ourselves really quickly, like GRC can. And start paving all kinds of stuff, but we're not going to do that. Those things cost a lot, and guys like our friends at Drift Masters, they got a sweet deal. The city actually stepped in and offered them help with the stadium, and they spent the dough to pave that course inside the arena, and they were able to do that. I don't think we're as fortunate here. There aren't municipalities and cities and counties that are really funding that type of stuff. Though we would love to, if we could find something, we would love to bring it into a stadium. I think we've thought about that for a long time.
I don't know why I never thought about paving. Because whenever we've pontificated about how exciting stadium drifting would be on the show, for some reason I never considered the actual paving of a course. That's not a quick or easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we did. We looked into it. I don't know if we mentioned it before, but when we were considering that 2008 Red Bull event, one of the options was to go into now it's the StubHub Center, but it used to be the Home Depot Center where the LA Galaxy play, and literally we would have to pay rent every day. We were laying pavement down, we had to pay rent, and every day we were ripping the pavement out, we had to pay rent, and then we had to replace the grass, and obviously pay for the pavement, and then that's not even producing or putting on the event. So that just wasn't feasible for us.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess still we'll keep it on the back burner going forward until the right opportunity arises. But
Well,
yeah,
I still think we're lucky with the tracks we do have, Sam. I think we have
Of
some
course.
of the coolest drift tracks in the world, and obviously starting off at Long Beach, I think that's a pretty historic course that, as is actually probably as cool or more cool than a stadium, and then obviously Atlanta's another one. I think we have very, very iconic tracks that I bet a lot of people in other countries wish they can replicate, especially the size and the magnitudes of the track. But I think they're just something that we've all dreamt of having a stadium drift event at one point. And hopefully it's in the works somewhere or somehow, or we just find a big money guy. Hopefully Paco and 2F can sponsor it for you guys. But
I thought Paco was going to win the Powerball, and then go Dave.
I don't need to win the Powerball, bro. I'm loaded.
Paco's,
I'm already loaded.
Yeah, come on.
Let's do it. Let's do it then.
Yeah.
Can we, before we move on, can we talk about your style choices today, gentlemen? Looks like Corey's about to go snowboarding, and Paco is Cholo Paco. Like, what's going on with?
Paco's dropping her album.
Yeah, I'm about to send it.
Well, if you know, Sam, it's cooled down about 80 degrees out here, so I had to put on my winter clothes.
Is it 80 degrees? Dang.
Yeah.
I'm wearing shorts and sandals.
Corey's all bundled up, ready
bundled
for
up.
How down in Long Beach, are you guys seeing any smoke from all the fire business going on down there?
Not so much. I mean, we smell in the air, but I mean, when it was first going off, you can definitely see the haze in the sky. So it's kind of sad. So it's been crazy. Yeah.
The day that I left for Germany, Venice was so bad. Like it was 100-foot visibility and smoke and fire everywhere. It's really awful stuff going on up there.
I'm actually spending Thanksgiving in Monterey, California, which is only a couple hours from the closest fire.
There.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes.
But hopefully, if any of you guys have friends or family up there, you've managed to get out and save as much as you can, and hopefully that is contained shortly. What's up with Korea? So that was a new announcement. You guys are doing Formula Drift Korea for the first time ever.
Is this North Korea or South Korea?
That's a great
North
question.
Korea. That's why it started, is because they just finally opened up the border. Kim Jong.
Well, just in case you didn't know, Paco. Yeah, in case you didn't know,
Glorious.
Ryan Sage and Dennis Rodman are right hand men.
Good buddies. Yeah.
It's actually close to the DMZ because it's north. The track is we formed a relationship to start a Formula Drift Korea series, kind of modeled after our Formula Drift Japan series. Mm-hmm. It's essentially it's a Korean series, and it will probably be predominantly Korean drivers that participate in it. It's developing the sport. There's enthusiasts there, and the sport is slowly growing. So the timing, I think it's good. We have some Korean companies in the past and currently that have been involved in the series. So having that connection is really good. We even had a couple of sponsors, come up to us afterward. And interesting enough, we were just talking about Korea. So this is great. So let's find a way to either bring drivers, teams, or even just some sponsorship dollars to Korea. And it's a slow and steady process, like a lot of things that we do. Again, it's 4 rounds. It's the first year. It's going to be just at one track, similar to some of our Pro-Am series where it's at one track. And I think it's about just building the base and consistency and getting drivers and teams kind of used to competing. And then from there, whether it's season 2 or season 3, we'll work on with the promoter there to see if there's other tracks to add. I mean, there aren't a ton in Korea. But this one's great. It's an hour north of Seoul, so we are pretty close to kind of the main hub of things and city center and all that. And going north, so a little bit closer to the DMZ.
Are you incentivizing any of the U.S. drivers to go over there? Like we see Forsberg and Field competing in like the Chinese series. Is there any? How do you get other drivers in there, or is there even incentive to, or do you just want Korean locals to be involved?
I think first and foremost is definitely Korean locals. I think it's about building, kind of raising their game and getting them to compete. I think our philosophy is different than other series. We're not really in the market to subsidize and kind of like, seed and prop that. If there are sponsors in Korea, if there are teams, if there are companies that are interested to bring drivers over, I mean, obviously that we'd welcome that, and we'd love to have the top drivers go to Korea, and I think that's a good attraction for the Korean series. I think it's a great way to showcase the higher level of driving to them. But I think it's almost better to work from the ground up and to develop local drivers. I think if pro drivers are to be involved rather than compete with the local drivers, it should be in aid of local drivers. If it's being brought in to offer clinics, guys like Kevin or even Steph to go over and teach car builders about how vehicles should be set up properly, and give them the tools to build the sport on their own, rather than, hey, let's teach you how to spend a lot of money to hire hired guns from all over the world to come drive in your national series.
What you just said,
Paco, Corey, you probably know. You can answer yours as well in the same time, Corey. But I don't know much about Korean drivers of the sport there already. If you want to touch on that as well.
I know there's a couple that went to D1. Obviously, their names are kind of hard to remember, but I noticed a few of them that went to the FIA a couple weeks ago. So
yeah, I've followed, Hyundai with the Genesis and a few other the platforms are based out of Korea. So I know there was a strong community there for sure that I've been kind of seeing develop over the year. But the one thing that, Jim pointed out was, trying to evolve the sport and getting more knowledge and education out there, especially for that series to kind of develop and flourish on their own. I wish we can do something like that for our Pro-Am series here in the United States. And I think that is for the future of Pro 1 and Pro 2 drifting is, once again, finding a way to develop our grassroots organizations here through you guys or some of your means to, once again, I think if we can start developing our guys at a younger age, because right now, once again, it's like you look at golf, kids are getting golfing at 4, 5, 6 years old with trainers, and that's how they become professionals. I think we should be looking at our grassroots almost in the same way where this first generation of drifters are phasing out. What are we doing to prepare to fill that? Are we creating the or supporting the Pro-Am series needed to help develop the next wave of all-stars?
Corey, sounds like you need to go to Korea.
Well, one thing to hit on there, and it kind of picking up with something that Jim mentioned, and it has to do with a little bit of our current business philosophy, is that if you look at Korea, if you look at Japan, they are similarly modeled in the way that we developed the U.S. series. Mm-hmm. And the way that we developed the U.S. series was really about sweat equity, organic growth, and not taking outside capital to build something so extreme right out of the gate.
Right.
But to find out whether or not the model would actually work and be sustainable. And I'm not saying that venture capital or outside capital is a bad thing. It is in many instances, and it probably could be for our business as well. But I think what you need to do initially, if you have an idea, for all the entrepreneurs out there, is to figure out your model and whether or not your model can be sustainable. And I think where we're at in the Pro Series right now is we've got a really good basis to operate on for the foreseeable future. And the drivers in the series have now matured to a level where they now understand, many of them understand the ins and outs of how to run their own business. Correct. And how to make it successful for the long term, what they need to do in competition, what they need to do with their marketing, what they need to do with managing their finances. And that in all possible ways should be a platform on which other Pro 2 drivers and Pro-Am drivers can work on, so that when they get to that point, they are not going to be a one and done. And the Pro 2 side of things and the Pro-Am side of things probably need the most development, but it doesn't really help them at all if they spend all of their savings or their parents' money or their friends' money getting to the pro level, only to find out that they're way off the mark in terms of what they need to do with the program.
Right. And that's
so
sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's just kind of like a
Yeah.
kind of the foundation of our philosophy with regards to the development of the sport.
I totally agree with you, but the thing is like, who's telling them that? You know what I mean? I think, especially right now, because obviously we want this to go on forever, and we want to make sure that we're continually bringing new talent into the sport. And you could look at other racing organizations or sporting organizations that there's proper developments and proper tools. There's, high school, varsity, there's college, there's stepping stones to get to the pros. And I still feel that some of our feeder series here to get into the pros is still kind of scattered. And I don't know if the talent is going to be make or break. It's kids gambling, hoping that they're going to make or break. And, I want to put a lot of the responsibility on the Pro-Am organizations to take account for that, for the development of passing on. Because we've now seen Pro-Am series do one event, issue a license, and say, see you later. Does that mean that driver is capable of doing 4 or 8 rounds of Formula Drift? Unless there was proper education. But I would love to, at one point, try to figure out a development program or a strategy or a quote-unquote university to get that second wave going. I know there's a lot of people stepping up and coming in with their licenses and things like that, but try to streamline something or try to get that entry level going. And I think knowledge is key here, and I don't know if they're all getting it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's a variety in the variable in the various Pro-Am organizers. And that's the tricky part, because a lot of people still think that they are owned and operated by us, but they're not. We're working in conjunction with independent, organizers to, work with them to feed basically drivers into Pro 2. Mm-hmm. And it's a two-way relationship. There are some things that we could do better and be more proactive in promoting them. We're always looking at how to do that, vice versa. Like you said, you're right. Some of the onus is on them to be, one of the topics the last couple of years is, it's been said that some organizers have, compromised, enforcing certain regulations to be less strict because it helps them increase car count, and that's how they make revenue. And at the same time, it's like we understand that, because if you don't get the car count up, if you don't, get entries, then you can't keep operating these events. You can't obviously go broke doing it. You don't want to go away after a season. So it's a hard balance, and we understand that, because it's an independently operated small business, and they need to make money. Yep. But at the same time, there's some integrity to it that you need to, operate by some set of rules and standards, and we've given some guidelines to that. And so there's a balance to that, and it's tricky.
No, I would love to, if there's any way for us to be support role in that in some degree, we would love to try to help. Obviously, we work with Vegas Drift and those guys with some media and content and things like that. But if there's any opportunity to help produce a second or third wave, we would fully be on board to help facilitate or help that at one point or another. But yeah, I think it's very relative to these other series that you're developing to get them to see if they're sustainable. And I think we need that same idea here. See if we can get these other series sustainable and produce hopefully future drivers and champions for you guys.
Yeah, and it's not just the Pro-Am guys. I think it's drifting globally.
100%.
I mean, one thing that's going on now that I think will kind of make this a little bit more clear is that, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought I blacked out. Is that, look at what's happening now. Global organizations are asking for what I guess you could say are assets that have been developed within Formula Drift. So our judges basically are traveling around the globe, doing different events and lending their ear to certain types of ways to approach the sport. Because after 15 years, you've learned a lot in terms of how to make the drivers happy, how to construct judging, and all those kind of things. The same is being said in terms of the operational side. People are asking, well, what happens when you do this? And what about pinning K-rails? And how does this work? And we get hit up all the time for basically kind of like consultancy style type work. And this is something that we've had to think about very deeply, because there are many organizers, the Dave Egans of the world, and some of our friends that do other events that really don't need our help. They already kind of know what's going on, but they very much look at what's going on in the US, because Formula Drift, as I understand it, is probably the only series that is standalone and self-sustainable by itself right now. If you look at D1, this this will be kind of for the the drift nerds, is that D1 has always been kind of the foundation of drifting, but one of the things that it never really was the standalone motorsport, right? It was always a marketing expense and objective for media and content distribution.
Yep.
And one of the things that we learned about doing FD Japan is that drifting events in Japan are actually really freaking hard to model out, because they're so different in the US. You actually have to do a lot of different things, and it's way different over there than it is here. So the global community and guys that are doing it right, like Dave and the RDS guys, I think they understand all of this. But ultimately, what you want to get to is to try to build a sport that can stand alone on its own for the long term without needing something else to prop it up. And all the things that we just talked about are important. Judging is important. Infrastructure is important. Liability is important. Learning how to operate the event. Of course, the entertainment side of things is really important. You can't have a 15-hour day that just drags on and on and on and on. It's got to be entertaining 100%. To fans. And that seems to be universal across the globe of what people are interested in when they want to be entertained. And so all these things they're moving pieces. But in some sense, we've been lucky enough to have been around for a long time that we've made all the mistakes, and we're going to make more mistakes, of course, but we've learned a lot along the way to where the model, I think, is there now for people to adopt and, take that on board, not only at the Pro-Am level, but also at the global level.
Are you guys contracting out your jobs at Korea, or are you going to be at every American round, every Japanese round, every Korean round?
There's going to be a skeleton staff that goes to Korea.
I say, because you guys can't really extend yourselves much further at this point, I imagine.
No.
No.
Could we change FD Florida with one run in Korea?
We have one more year there on the contract, and then
we are heading to Korea.
You send me ideas, Paco, and then we'll talk about it.
Oh, I'm a factory.
You're a brave man, Jim.
I'm a factory for great ideas.
Yeah, you're a
you
brave
just open
man.
up the floodgates, Jim.
Yeah, you're a brave man for offering.
Hey, it's better. Everybody has criticism, but not a lot of people have solutions.
No, actually, I mean, and I was just like
truth.
trying to bring up something. I think Sam has a little bit of pickle. No, how do you say that?
No, they said it right. Sam has a little bit of pickle.
Sam has a little. Sam has a little pickle.
He has a little pickle.
I don't have anything to bring up. No, I mean, I made the joke earlier in the text when we were talking about this show with June Ryan and doing it. It's like, we've been vocal critics of Orlando for many years, just from mostly the weather perspective, but also the track is kind of beat up in comparison to some of the other bigger venues. But also Wall is magical, and like you don't see anyone really complaining about Wall. And like Jim just said, I can't offer a better solution. There's been 3 different Formula Drift venues in Florida in the past 6 years, so obviously they're working on trying to find what the best solution is to
what
reach
happened
that
with
demographic.
Homestead. Wasn't it a good place for FD?
It was better than Palm Beach, but in the first outing at Orlando, the results all around were better. It's definitely it's a nicer venue. It's more pristine and all that, but we also were limited on the growth element because yes, it's a big track, but the turn configuration was very limited. The way we could set up the bleachers were very limited. So if we were to build even 25% more stands than we did that year, we would have there wouldn't be any space for that. So those are the things that factor into it. And so a lot of times we get flack for picking potentially boring venues or layouts or whatever. Oh, this place is way better, but that may be one factor. The driving may be way better, but there's 10 other factors that we have to consider.
I actually enjoyed the Orlando event this year. It's pretty interesting, and my chief complaints about the event are kind of nullified at this point. So I feel like I've just gotten soft. Like I don't know. I don't have anything to really hate on.
What I was gonna say was
Air-conditioned bathrooms.
what I was gonna say
Yeah.
that's impressive is you guys are getting to a point now where you're looking at we just need more room. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That right there
That's
is
the biggest.
good
That's the
sign.
biggest problem, right?
That's a good
That's
sign.
always a good problem to
that's
have.
a pretty incredible sign that it's when you outgrow your venues. It's like Sam going from a medium to an extra large t-shirts.
No, I'm single large right now.
What are you, Sam? You're a
I stopped wearing baby T-shirts and I start wearing adult T-shirts.
good man.
So you don't shop.
Good
You
man.
don't shop at Forever 21 anymore.
He's out of
No, I
Baby
still
Gap.
shop at Baby Gap. I usually do a Baby Gap quadruple XL.
Nice.
They just make certain styles for babies that you can't replicate in
No,
the
but
adult size.
We had this discussion before. It's like when we look at a venue now, can it sustain this traveling circus of thousands and thousands and thousands of people? And obviously, Wall's been holding up, but even going through the pits, it's like there's not an ounce
The
of space.
wall is packed. Like,
yeah,
you
there's not an
couldn't
ounce
you
of
couldn't run a
space
Pro
in that
2.
pit. No. And then
Then wasn't it at Wall when somebody flipped out like around the exit or something? Like some fan, like people couldn't leave.
I don't know.
It's like
That happens. That can happen anywhere.
Yeah,
really.
it's,
Moron.
yeah. Might happen
Yeah, you
when I
think
leave your
of-
house.
Yeah, Wall doesn't have a lot more room. Seattle,
Seattle
there's a
was-
little more room in
yeah.
Seattle, but barely. Texas, not a lot of room there.
I like how the motocross track next to Orlando decided to put on an event right as we're ending, so nobody could
Oh
get
yeah, that was
Oh,
messy.
God.
their track.
Well, the trick is to spend the next 3 hours at the track drinking beer. That's the only move. What is? Are there? I know we still have all off season to decide these things. Are there any major changes that you haven't discussed yet to the rule book, to the judging, to car building?
I think the rule book is basically out, the technical rule book. So I mean,
Right.
there shouldn't be too many secrets out there. Off the top of my head, some of the stuff that he changed, I think, or that Kevin changed, was stuff that I think people knew that were coming, and a few clarifications, but nothing super crazy. I think everybody could get a copy of it and see, but I don't know if there's anything notable to really talk about. The sporting regulation side, we always spend a little bit more time on. A lot, because that's where the judging regulations are, and we always want to do a deep dive with all the judges and Kevin to kind of go over areas where, as I mentioned at the early onset of the podcast, is trying to see if there were things that in hindsight should have gone differently, or if there's terminology or the way that we're talking about the sport. One of the things that you picked up on, Sam, when we were talking about that, is this whole idea of language that we implemented with regards to the lead and chase driver responsibilities. We never used to talk about the sport like that before. We used to talk about it in a completely different manner, but adding the lead and chase driver responsibilities kind of came at the driver's behest, because so many of them were saying, you have to factor in what the lead is doing, because if you want me to get proximity, I need to know that if that driver makes a mistake, I'm not going to be held at fault. And so that takes you down a rabbit trail, and you have to kind of determine what's going to be the best way to talk about that. So those are things I think that, our goal is to get that out, sometime around the new year, but we'll certainly probably have a few, not major changes, but definitely some refinement in language and maybe a few things in the sporting regulations that people might like.
Do you guys think like a good example of that would be, I think, Essa and Farouk at Irwindale, where the judges ruled in favor of Essa because I think the determination was that Farouk kind of led him into the wall, and Farouk did pull out of the wall. Like he just, his line was unsustainable to some degree, and as a result, the follow driver collided. Is that kind of what you're talking about as far as what the roles and the rules are as lead chase driver is concerned?
I think so. I think, in your head, the idea about when the line has been crossed in certain instances with regards to judging is always going to be where you pick the line is going to be somewhat arbitrary. You can move it 10 degrees in one direction, 10 degrees in the other direction, and it's probably going to mean the same thing. Where you want to draw the line, hopefully, is where everybody more or less kind of agrees. So that particular example, I think, is a good one to do a deep dive on, to figure out, is this the way that we want to present the sport to fans, and also in talking to drivers to basically, get a better understanding. And I'm not sure if the fans know, but this year we implemented the judges doing mandatory ride-alongs with the drivers to kind of understand vehicle dynamics better and what it feels like to be in the cars and things like that. And what would actually you would feel comfortable saying, yes, that could have been avoided from the chase driver given him being in proximity, or no, it wasn't avoidable being in proximity. And then that's where you kind of hope to establish a line.
Is there right now a well-established chase zone for proximity to the lead car? Because like we've said it many times, and I think the judges are appropriately reflecting this in their calls. But from the fan perspective, there is still that somewhat disconnect of a, let's say, A driver is lead car and B driver is chase car. The B driver, like, rather than being on his door, he's on his mirror and like passing him and very shallow versus where is the highest scoring, for lack of a better term, location to be on a lead car as a chase car driver?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, we actually made a physical graph because that's actually one of the biggest questions I think that we need to better talk about and answer. Drivers, no surprise here, have a great amount of divergent opinions on that. If you are at proximity, but say with 5 degrees less angle, is that the same thing as maybe being a foot off the back, but at the same amount of angle or better, or something along those lines, right? And trying to come up with ways to interpret that visually is something that we did at the beginning there at Long Beach. And I think we got a good grasp on it, but it definitely was not agreed to by a consensus of drivers. Many drivers thought that having slightly less angle but being on the door was better than being back at the quarter panel but at the same angle. And I don't really know how the fans intuitively look at that. I think proximity is always better, but at what cost, right? Like,
right.
If the angle is clearly noticeably less, all things being equal, you would think that would be worse than the guy doing that with slightly less proximity but the same angle, because that would seem to be harder to do, right? And if you're going by what's harder to do, then that would be the way that you would go. So yeah, we do have a graph for that. We have a visual laid out of all those different scenarios. I don't know if it's in the sporting regulations. It may be, but yeah, we do talk about that a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I think needs to be as clearly ironed out as possible, because it's definitely exciting to see. Like, I think of the Big Bank at Irwindale as one of the main locations, Seattle, these other Big Bank tracks where the lead driver could be running the wall up against the wall, and the chase driver is literally covering probably hundreds of less feet of track because they are so much lower, but they are mirror to mirror, which is definitely exciting and cool to see to some regard. But you also know that he is sacrificing great amounts of track coverage and angle and all these other aspects. And while it can be exciting as a fan, it's like, I don't know if that's really the most it's the greatest show of skill. Not to say that it doesn't take a large amount of skill. It's just one of those tough questions that I'm curious to see how you guys in the sport will react as a whole in the future.
Yeah, another one is duration of proximity. That's another hot item right now that everybody's been talking about is, how much do you value the overall duration of proximity given a chase driver, as opposed to, say, less duration at close proximity but closer overall proximity. You see what I mean there? Like, so if you're surging forward, backing off, and you're losing proximity when you back off, but you have another driver, then they reverse, and the other driver is not surging all the way to the same degree that the other driver did, but his overall proximity was more consistent in terms of the duration, right? But maybe not as deep. How would you go with that? I think he said he's done. He got his Uber Eats.
Oh boy, nope. He just
Good
brings
job,
in
Sam.
the big dog. There it is.
Oh, that was my boss Andy just banging
That's
on
cool. That's cool. I just really explained something very deep right there, and you walked out. That's cool.
Well, he was hammering on my door, and I'm like, oh god, there's gotta be some button.
Oh, look at Lapuka.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Andy.
I'm sure the boys can properly respond to that before.
Sam can do whatever he wants. He's been on a plane for like 2 days.
I know. I haven't. I've been eating plane food for 18 hours, and I didn't even ask for food, but thankfully he brought some on there. But sorry to be so rude.
Yeah, good job, Sam.
Corey, what you got, baby?
No, I'm just I'm ready to highlight, going into 2019.
Well, let's summarize something. So we're gonna have full season Formula Drift America.
Yep.
We still have Formula Drift Japan. How many rounds, Japan?
5 rounds.
5 rounds.
Yep.
Did it used to be 4?
It was it was 5 last year.
Okay,
But it
5.
was 4 before. Yes.
Okay, but then you also have FD China. No?
Korea.
Nope.
Just Korea.
Paco, get together,
Wait.
man.
Wasn't there? Okay, so what are the other ones? I kind of like I remember. Is there like an FD Thailand or maybe or?
No, we were doing a Asia series, mainly based in Southeast Asia. We were in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
Rotated around year to year. That operated for about 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you were thinking about that.
Okay, so that's officially gone.
Correct.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so I was at some point I was like, okay, so you guys gonna do FD Japan, FD America, FD Asia, and now FD Korea all at the same time. And it's like, when are you guys gonna have time to enjoy yourselves? So FD Asia pretty much is gone. It's been substituted by Korea. Okay, yeah, it's kind of like, got it.
I mean, we do. You know, what's really interesting is that the impact of that series was quite large. I mean, it was gone. I don't think because the drifting base was gone. It was because those countries were so small that it was predicated on a big media deal, and essentially the media deal fell apart because it used to be a joint venture between Fox and ESPN. And that network went away, and then so the dynamic of how that series was covered kind of went away. And so because of that, there were sponsorship and funding mechanisms that went away. But the remnants of FD Asia is still felt today. 2 Singaporean drivers are doing very well in FD Japan. The recent FI event featured previous Foreign of Asia champion Tengku Janlei was competing there. A couple of another Malaysian driver and a couple of Thai drivers that were active and part of FD Asia were also competing there, and they're competing elsewhere in and around Asia. So I think the guys that we partnered with did their part and made the impact to elevate the level of drifting in that region. And the top guys are still out there competing.
You mentioned something there, Jim, and I want to bring it up. We should probably talk about it just for a minute, but FIA. We should probably talk about that for a minute. But I did.
Why is that funny? Why y'all laughing?
I did watch just a brief moment of it from what I could last after wanting to gouge my eyes out with some licorice or something.
Whoa.
And I wasn't the only one that felt this way about the event, but I don't know if you saw, but Speed Hunters Dino wrote a pretty incredible article where he was so blunt on what he felt, the vibe, the atmosphere, the driving, what an FI event should be in comparison to other FI events, and how this one compared to those. And once again,
Paraphrase the article there, Corey. What do you say? Haven't seen it.
I think he left at top 16, or he was there just for a short period of time and just said it seemed like it was clustered. There was no organization. There was multiple things that just seemed like an old D1 event, and that it showcased the reason why it doesn't exist anymore, literally, and that he ended up leaving the venue early because of that. But
this is mostly Ryan Lontaine's fault.
Yeah, because Ryan went over there and helped. Ended up not working out. No, but I once again, this is supposed to be the pinnacle. And when we last talked, did they have that deal for 2 years, Jim, or was it a year-to-year kind of contract with D1?
It was a 1 with the option to extend 2, and they extended the 2. So this year and next year will still be organized by Sun Pros, which is the parent company of D1. 2020 is going to be interesting because the venue that everybody is used to, that's Odaiba, is going away because the 2020 Summer Olympic Games will be in Tokyo, in Japan. So that area is going to be redeveloped, or it's going to be used. So the onus on them is going to be finding a suitable venue that's going to attract the same or more fans to be there. I mean, being in the middle of Tokyo. I mean, Odaiba is not in the middle of Tokyo, but essentially it's in Tokyo. is quite easy to get to. There's literally a subway station that is right there next to this venue. You can go from anywhere in Tokyo, get there, and walk out, and you're there. So yeah, to find another location is gonna be tricky for them.
Yeah, and they mentioned the lack of obviously countries involved was narrowed down this year. Obviously, nobody from the United States. How could this be an FIA World event when there's only a handful of countries competing in it? I think we have more countries competing in Formula Drift than we.
Well, they also ran it the week of SEMA, which is not the most conducive.
Well, I mean, I think I could tell you this. Like, this is a love-hate, from the heart kind of issue for me because, I spent time going over there, being a part of the FI working group, which now is going to be going into next year is going to be an official commission, which is great, I guess, for the sport because it's official. But it's not great because I think neither the FIA nor the group really has a full grasp of where they want to take it, what the plan is, foundationally speaking. Broadly speaking, sure, they want to create these intercontinental cups and world championships and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty standard FIA business. If you look at open wheel, if you look at touring cars, if you look at any of those series, there's a formula to make that happen. But yes, the disappointing part in that is that spending all this time, giving all this input, last year my frustration was that the rules and regs that we had spoken about as a group that we agreed to were not adhered to by the promoter. They turned it into essentially a D1 event. But hey, everybody took it as this is the first time. It's a learning curve. Let's just build upon it, improve it. Great. Leaving last year's event, there was a lot of input from competitors, from potential sponsors that went, or sponsors of teams that went as well. I don't know how much of that information was heard or was taken into account. This year I was a vocal advocate to say, look. Right. To get the top drivers, you need to be more commercially savvy, meaning you need to tell these guys, how are you going to raise the funds to go? How there were X amount of people that came to the event. There were X amount of people that watched it online. There were X amount of media outlets that came and covered it from these amount of countries. So when you come, this is the exposure you and your sponsors are going to get. So please go raise the funds to come and compete. Vaughn, James, Mad Mike, whoever it is, go and find a way to come there. None of that was provided. So how do you expect someone that's commercially and sponsorship savvy like Vaughn going to go out there and find the funds to be able to campaign properly to be there? Then you have SEMA. Right. Well, how do you can't expect American drivers or drivers in a series like Formula D, where the center of the world is the SEMA show, and everybody that's that gives you money is going to be there, and they expect you to be there to sign autographs, to bring your car, to do all these things. This is your bread and butter. So what do? Do you go for the betterment of drifting internationally, or do you go to sustain your program, your livelihood, to continue to compete and do what you do? Well, you got to go to the SEMA show. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to put it on the weekend of the SEMA show, then nobody can go, and so that's what happens. And if you look at just even social media ranking, out of the top 20 drifting drivers in the world, they may have had one, maybe two, and so it's pretty sad. And I think there's so much potential in that event. I believe that there could be, but now 2 years into it, kind of making the same mistakes and making some new ones. I don't know.
Yeah, it's we saw Field, we saw Odie, we saw Essa try to compete, and they all came back kind of shaking their heads, saying, "Yeah, we're going to go back to SEMA. We're going to raise some more money and once get my program more sustainable here," because the return on what they got invested was, they didn't seem very happy with it. And
now you're talking about year one, though, right?
Yeah, but that's why there wasn't a return. But
there was no American representation,
and so that's
which
why
is interesting that they didn't remedy the problems of year one, and like Ryan or Jim just said, they made new problems as well, which is kind of rough.
I mean, look, it's the hint of that is, you look at guys that have extra cars where, James has an extra car that could be shipped. Peter has an extra car that could be shipped. There's got to be a reason why, and you got to ask them. I'm not implying anything, but why weren't they there? Mad Mike just won the Formula Drift Japan Championship. His car, him and TBC Magic is in Japan. It's there. The car may or may not have already didn't leave to go back to New Zealand. So why wasn't he there? Obviously, you got to get it from them, but there's some disconnect between this event and attracting the best of the best.
I would agree.
Corey wasn't there.
No, they told me they couldn't handle me. It'd be like Godzilla coming back, so that's why I stayed. That's why I stayed home.
Well, one thing that you guys might be interested in, it's just a little anecdote, but it pertains to what we were talking about here with the FIA event, is in the off season when they were having a lot of the meetings, and you can talk to Ryan about this because he'll give you all the details, is that he really, from his mouth was, I really had to put my foot down to ensure that we were going to get some consistent international judging standards.
Ryan, hold on 1 second there. Did you possibly unplug your microphone? Are you hearing that, guys? He sounds very far away.
How's that?
There you go.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
One thing that Ryan did in the off season was really try to advocate for some consistent international judging standards, and really put his foot down in the group and got a lot of the other friendly parties that we work with to go along in that support. And one of the reasons why is that the promoters seem to be so committed to DOS, and we always wanted to know why. And, now I'm going to do a little bit of theorizing, but one of the reasons why I think that they've been so committed to DOS, besides maybe the financial commitment to it, is part of the legacy that Keiichi Tsuchiya had on D1. In the early days of D1, there was no such thing about questioning a judge. Whatever he said went, and that was just the fact of the matter. And if you wouldn't say anything publicly about it, you would just go on your way, bow, and move on. When Keiichi stopped judging, that kind of stopped happening. And so, what I think happened is that they needed to have something that was a digital replacement for Keiichi that would not be something that you could complain about. But I think what they didn't really factor in there is that it actually produced the opposite result. It actually was more confusing for people, and drivers had to work really hard to understand how to utilize it and even manipulate it. But what it didn't take into account are some of the international judging standards that the rest of the bodies and some of the people that we work with have all agreed are a good foundation to move forward. And I think if you don't have that, there's always going to be some piece of the pie missing if you don't have some consistent standards across the board.
Yeah. What do you think is it salvageable at this point? Is there a successful road going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think given that the 2020 is going to be in Japan still, there's obviously the timing of things like SEMA. I know from the FIA side, they want to finish before their annual prize giving. That's their year-end award banquet. That's, I think, usually in like December. That's where Formula One and WEC and all those guys are officially crowned their championships. So they need to finish before that. So I think it really leaves November as the only option. So between the Olympics and being in Japan and venue, do they go further south to somewhere like Osaka or anywhere else? I don't know. I think the venue is going to be really tricky for them. But I think even before that, it goes back to, look, if you want the best of the best, you really have to listen to what they're asking for. Forget us here. Forget the organizers. Talk to the teams and hear what they're asking for. And maybe there's something that can be pulled off so that they are willing to pay the fee to go, which is quite high in the drifting world of things, and know that they're going to be delivered a an exposure package that's going to be valuable enough for them to invest and for them to get their sponsors to invest to be there. Because otherwise, right now, you're right. You can go compete in, in Formula Drift, in Drift Masters, and D1 New Zealand, and IDC, in RDS, and you could probably get as much, if not more, exposure in some of those series, and probably get more people coming to the live event than you would at this event.
But do you think that you guys think that FIA actually sees this past event as a negative, as like, wow, we really need to change what's going on, or they see it as like, oh, everything went great, like the event was awesome?
I think from year 1 to year 2, I think it was. I don't think there was enough people in play that have seen a top level drifting event. They didn't come to our Long Beach or Atlanta or Irwindale. They did not go to a Drift Masters round. They didn't go to Mandela Park to watch the IDC finale. They didn't go to any of these events. So I don't know if they had something to compare it to. But the fact that there was a crowd, and it was a decent crowd, and the event was pulled off without a major glitch, I think they saw that as a victory and something to grow off of. This year's crowd seemed like it was decent, but operationally, I don't know. I wasn't there. I was asked to be a steward again, but again, just look at us. Like we're the series organizer. I'm involved with the working group. There were so many things happening in SEMA that were so important to our business that I couldn't leave on Wednesday night to go and be there to work that event for 3 days.
Like, I really wonder if anybody on the FIA offices, like, they're like, oh, this is what they're saying about us. Like reading, for example, Speed Hunters. I mean, it's a very reliable source of worldwide racing and everything car related. And I mean, I'm reading the article, and it's rough.
Yeah,
And,
I just tried to scan over it a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rough. At
Dino
the very
is
end.
definitely like holding.
I don't
like,
even think that they I believe year 1, maybe this year, one of the outlets, and I think it might have been Speed Hunters, and again, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but there were outlets that were having a hard time getting media credentials.
Yeah, that's what
And
this
there were
article has
people,
mentioned. It's like
people that the credentialing folks, and I don't know if it's FI or if it's the organizer, they didn't know who they were. And it's like, come on, you gotta, if you want the coverage, you need to know who you are trying to get coverage from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of a little bit of the lifeblood of the series is showing that it actually happened. And if you don't have people showing that this event occurred, then it may as well have not occurred.
Yeah, I really wonder if the whole date was something in purpose, or
I just said we invite Mr. FIA to Atlanta, put him in the Team Rowdy pit.
his name is John Todt.
John Thought.
John Todt.
Bring out John Thought to Atlanta. We'll put John Thought in the Team Rowdy pit.
Oh,
We'll have some pizza. We'll watch some drifting.
Pabst.
He'll probably go up there with
Pabst Blue
Jared
Ribbon.
and do the inaugural ceremony with the Air Force. We'll convert him to an American,
Yeah,
and then
mean,
that'll open up the doors for him to come
he's
back.
French. Technically, it's our ally.
Good, even
Yep,
better.
yeah.
Even better. He
That's why we got Lantain. He's our
Ah,
Yeah,
sacre
he'd be
bleu.
French speaker.
you go.
Oui.
I just said we
Ooh
go.
la la.
Yeah, we'll just make sure we're known more so than we are, to make them not have an option for 2021. That's the game
Jim, you
plan.
said that you were excited about SEMA and things that were happening with partners and all that. What drifting, bigger picture, little picture, whatever, what are you most excited about coming up?
Honestly, I wasn't really excited for SEMA. It was 2 weeks after Irwindale. We were barely crawling, into like regular life, and then we're already, getting ready to go to SEMA. And we had a really busy SEMA. Luckily, we had a lot of stuff going on. We were coordinating the drifting drivers for the Kia Stingers and their activation. We were planning for our press conference. And then, we were fortunate enough to get some space, and we had a 15-year anniversary wall and display Chris Forsberg's car. It was the first time we kind of had a booth out at SEMA, so that was cool. It got pretty good traffic, and then we were working with SEMA again, I think for the third year at SEMA Ignited. So drifting demonstration, I think we had like 11 drivers, pro and pro
that was
drivers.
pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it was just challenging. They had a new lot because of all the construction that was going on across the street. But that went off well. It's a good, entertaining piece of SEMA Ignited, and those are two kind of SEMA show moving pieces that involved us. But, I think I mentioned in some post or something, but all the moving car activations all involve drifting. So for those companies that use it but have not found a way to talk to us or the drivers in the series, I think you're missing out. So when Continental Tires and BMW has a thrill ride area that's basically drifting BMWs, and they're not willing to connect with ESSA or anybody like that, they're missing out.
I walked by that area to go to Ignited as I was walking out, and I was like, okay, weird. I didn't know this was even happening. One, two is like, who are the drivers? I'm kind of curious because they were drifting pretty well. Three, no one was wearing helmets, and they were like going right up to not even K rails, just like open fences with spectators. That seemed really shady. Like it was kind of weird to see that, considering like all the safety stuff that we went through at the Kia activations on your end and our end. It's like, there's insurance, there's all this stuff. It's like, I can't imagine that their insurance wrote off. I'm like, let's just drift BMWs at 60 miles an hour and no helmets. It's cool.
Right.
So not to rat on those guys, but oof.
No, there's some things that were a little bit inconsistent, but yeah, you saw that. So they're doing that. Obviously, the guys at Hoonigan were out front, and so was Ford.
Corey did it. Corey, Corey and I had
blow up.
This is a cool little story here. Corey blew up his coupler from his intercooler to the turbo. Corey, you want to finish the story off?
Oh yeah, I saw your post. You were asking for parts.
Yeah, I was asking for parts, and I started just going through SEMA and scavenging from all the Chinese manufacturers and taking stuff off their shelves. Where do you want to
Apparently
finish?
no one at SEMA has parts.
Yeah,
we just need a coupler and some clamps, and no one at SEMA actually has car parts, which is pretty funny. But we ended up going to Vaughn, and Vaughn's team
hooked
us up with an exhaust clamp.
Yes,
that
and
Corey's soft driver hands and my soft editor director hands working on cars for the first time in a long time, like with one tool, like one.
And once again, that spot, bringing up what Jim's saying, that spot was presented by BF Goodwrench, and I know they previously involved with the series at one point with you guys at all. BF
Goodrich.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so they were the supporter of that whole area back there, and so you see Continental, you see BF, you see. Everything that you kind of mentioned, these companies now are using it to help launch, but just sustain.
Even Polaris and their little 3-wheel slingshots were doing little figure eights and donuts. Yep.
I'd really love to see, because we put I think Michelin tires on one of our cars, the GoPro Mercedes GTR. But I really want to see Michelin and BF Goodrich and these guys in the series again, if they were previously. Were Michelin in FD ever?
BF Goodrich was.
BF Goodrich was, yeah. I wonder. Yeah, it's like you said. Like, it's interesting that they're embracing drifting, but not fully. They're kind of quietly doing it.
I mean, it's if you think about it, look at every car commercial, everything. Like the only thing that looks, I mean, not necessarily better than drifting, but at least as impressive as drifting is jumping. And not every car can land a jump. I mean, we saw Vaughn.
Dude, that was the coolest.
It was super cool.
We were trying to egg him on to do that a couple years ago, and he just went out and hit it. I guess he was inspired by Joey Logano, kind of went out there a little bit earlier and took one of the more stockish Mustangs and kind of slowly went over it. But I was like, oh, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And he did the full send.
Right. That was like a mic drop, like an oil pan drop.
Literally.
I wonder how I haven't talked to him. I wonder how jacked up that car is. I wonder if the whole front end is pushed back an inch or two. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, like, you know, like there's no better way to advertise your products than with sliding cars. I mean, even like you guys seen like the high mileage Castrol, like whatever. Like they show like very old vehicles drifting around, like like because that looks super cool. So, I don't think any part manufacturer or any auto part supplier, whatever, if they're not getting into the drifting game right now, I mean they're getting their lunch, taken away by everybody else. Like, you know what I'm saying, Corey?
Kind of, but I'm thinking that we got a couple more years for NASCAR fans to fizzle away. They're not bringing in a younger audience. Global Rallycross guys need a place to go. Supercross is still cool, but I think in the next.
Who watches?
I think just in the next few years. Well, once again, let's look at the sport as a whole, right? Compared to motocross, motocross is sustainable.
Yeah.
And the reason it's sustainable is anybody can go to a dealership and buy a motocross and motorbike and pretend to be a motocross racer for $6,000. You could be a motocross racer and go to your local track. To be a monster truck driver, probably not. To be a NASCAR driver, probably not.
But
to be a drift guy, I can go down the street and buy 240SX for $2,300, do a few things to it, and I can go out there and start drifting tomorrow. I think what the attraction to the sport is, it's very obtainable for a lot of people.
And
I
think also chews up drivers too. Look at Mad Mike. Look at Turk. Like these are dudes that. And many other drivers did motocross, and then they hurt themselves, and you get in a race car.
We got to look at the attention span of the audience nowadays. A lot of people can't sit through 200 miles of oval track racing. They can't. Yep. Somebody told me the reason why everybody watches the last few laps of NASCAR is so they can watch the donuts at the end because that's the most exciting part. Yep. It's like you look at the audience and what's happening to society with social media and all these other things. We have an attention span that's a minute long or even less now. Drifting fulfills all that. It's an obtainable sport with low resources. It's in your face for 30, 45 seconds to a minute or whatever it is. It's very accessible. You can go anywhere in the United States and drift for very, very cheap. It's just that it's still young. And with more time, we're going to have more of that crossover. A lot of these older sports are slowly going to start fizzling away. And we're already seeing everybody get impacted by it. Yeah. So
do you guys think, for example, do you guys have a strategy to try to bring in more people into Formula Drift? I mean, obviously, you guys seen the success of the Formula Drift package on Forza. It seems like a lot of people is playing that. There are a lot of people is like more aware of Formula Drift just because of a video game. And like, do you guys have any strategy you guys are thinking for next year, trying to bring in more new fans and new sponsors?
Well, this is also a good segue into a super chat question here. I don't know if you already read it, Paco, but Georgi Kalichnikov says, what are your plans to make the FD website platform stand out? So that's pretty much your question, right?
I mean, I think first is on our staffing side, we have a lot of ground to cover. So we just need to, spend more time to cover more ground to get companies out to see what we do. As frustrating as what we saw at SEMA is, and having brands that aren't associated with either drivers or the series, do drifting-esque stuff, and even tons of commercials, and everybody can name off a dozen of them that feature it, and those brands probably are not involved in drifting in any form. As frustrating as that is, the fact that we're seeing more and more of it, it gives us, I think, hope that some element of those big corporations, whether it's an advertising agency or somebody internally there, has a vision for that, and it's about converting that. And so, yes, as Corey was saying, that the NASCAR audience has evolved and is changing or is fizzling away, we see that corporately as well, as old marketers that are really just into, hey, let's buy a Super Bowl ad, starting to evolve into what young people and what the current audience it wants, and the different trends. The hope is that they will start looking our way. But it also ties into what we started out our conversation, tonight about, is how do we make the sport understandable for somebody that's just walking in? And a lot of times, I think we've spoken with, some marketers where it's like, oh yeah, it looks cool, but I don't really get it. And to kind of, get over that hurdle, so that if they do get it, and if they can get it, or if they can, give them the idea that they can learn and have an opinion, right? You can walk in and you can pretend like baseball and be like, that was a bad call, that was a strike, that wasn't a ball. I think if we can give that, empower the fans to be like that, I think even on the sponsorship and corporate front, I think it will make it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And to add to that, I think one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is how do we get the major partners in the series, and by that I mean the sponsors and the drivers, to have one voice when it comes to the presentation of the sport. And the presentation of the sport is something that we're thinking a lot about right now. And we've worked really hard for the past couple of years to try and get everybody on the same page there, because, and you'll know this, Sam, is that when you come to a live event, it really is a different experience than even watching the live stream. It really does not encapsulate what it is like to be there. But you're starting to see with things like the high-speed drone and different things that we can implement, that all of a sudden that kind of footage changes the dynamic of the way that people think about the sport. And another area there is, because we only have 8 broadcasts, is how are we developing more content relevant to the people that are watching the sport already, to get them to tell their friends about it, to watch it, to become emotionally invested in drivers in a way that every time a video is released from those drivers, it gets traction, it goes viral, and all those kind of things. And I think the examples that we've seen of success of that are very numerous, from Matt Field stuff to all the stuff that Vaughn is doing, all the content that Turk's been creating, everybody from, Hoonigan, Donut, RS, all those guys are examples of being able to take a really cool sport like drifting, put it into compelling narratives, and to put that content out in places where the audience is more likely to see it. And I think that is a huge area of that's underdeveloped for us. We've started to do a lot more of it, but we need to be able to tell more of a story outside of the 8 weekends that we do an event. We need to have drifting from April to November be consistent throughout the weeks, and not just on the weekends that we participate. We don't want to just be tracking on social media just those 8 weekends. We want to be telling a story and a narrative about all the drivers in the series consistently throughout the year. And so that is, I think, a key area of development for us, and where an area that's been highly underutilized by us in the past because of things that we've had to be obligated to with regards to TV obligations and things like that. But I think moving into the future, more and more people are starting to understand that the vision of how to grow the sport is trying to speak to the audience where the audience mostly is.
Are there big changes coming to that distribution that you can talk about?
I think that there could be. I think we're committed at a bare minimum to taking what we developed this year with, some of the signature series like the FDXV stuff, where we told some 15-year recaps, and kind of building another foundation off of that. We've got, video editors in our office that we're going to keep implementing new content pieces, but we also want to continue to invest in the live stream and be able to take that content and repurpose it into other things. So if we get 5 hours of drone footage, we want to be able to put that out there so fans can, take a look at it and make it look slick. We want to implement more red cameras. We want to do super slow mo. We want to do more in-car stuff. A lot of the stuff that we're already capturing for TV that we could repurpose in a different way. But especially, I think what we really like to do is come up with ways that we can tell stories of the drivers, because I think that the emotional narrative there really moves the needle in a lot of different ways.
Definitely. And that's what drew me to this sport. My first year was trying to tell those emotional stories.
Well, that's also what drew us to start this podcast.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing more, because the driving is just the face layer of it all. There's it's like an onion, There's layers.
Got
Or like
layers?
a parfait. Before we, I guess let's send 2018 as a season to rest. What would you say was the biggest success of the Formula Drift 2018 season, and what would you say was the biggest failure, if you could be so humble as to call something a failure, if there was one? I don't know, maybe there isn't a big miss to you, but...
Well, I mean, for me, definitely the biggest failure was probably not noticeable, but I think we didn't really have a good policy in place for how to deal with weather. And it was completely chaotic internally, and we probably could have handled them and better prepared for that. So not that would have changed anything substantively, but I think there's one of the things that people take for granted, and we do as well, just by not thinking about it all the time, but we need to, is that in the United States, there's so many different elements of liability that we have to be concerned with. And we've been really lucky with drivers not sustaining any injuries. But when you add weather into the mix, especially when you have fans there and lightning and all that kind of stuff, it really does kind of really make you think about making sure that you're as planned and prepared as you can be. So that'd be one area where I think that, we could do some work, and we have done some work. I think the success is really just, for me, is really understanding and comprehending how big it is to, be surviving and thriving after 15 years. And that the opportunity I see, and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think there was more opportunity, is really, we are really just at the beginning here. I think we're starting to see where the narrative of the series is going to be relative to other sports. As Jim mentioned early on, things like GRC that had a ton of money behind them, but ultimately, and huge name athletes, but could not get out from underneath where they were in terms of their popularity, right? It was spending millions and millions of dollars, but not being able to recruit fans, not being able to recruit the things that we have. And we have been able to do that without any significant investment. And it makes me want people in that space and in that domain, a lot of those teams that invested in that sport, to take a more serious look at what we're doing. And I think that there's some great fruits that could be taken from that for not only the series, but more importantly, the teams that have been putting, tons of years of hard work and sweat into their programs, for them to possibly partner up with somebody that could help take their program to the next level and continue the sustainability. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, to see GRC kind of implode as it did, from your perspective, I'm sure that was a little bit frightening to some degree. But what's you kind of highlighted it there a little bit. But what do you take away from all that? If you want to just retouch on that idea, how do you not fall into that trap in 5, 10, 15 years?
Oh, I think I don't know all the ins and outs of why GRC imploded, but the public knowledge that is out there is basically they seem to be heavily dependent upon one major resource or two major resources from, one major brand and OEs that kind of dictated certain elements within the sport. And if that pin gets pulled, the foundation is not there. And a good example of this about, how that didn't happen to us was in 2008 when the market crashed. We lost something like 50% of our sponsor investment dollars, but we didn't go under. And the main reason we didn't go under is because fans actually came to the sport and came to the events, and we had that as a foundation to push us through, even though those are really, really crazy tight years and we had to make all kinds of budget cuts and things like that. But ultimately, the fans had been convinced that it was worth their while to come and buy a ticket from us one time a year. And I think if you have that, that is a great asset to have. And you can't manufacture that. You have to actually get people to commit and invest very important time in their lives. It's a whole weekend. And if you're at Road Atlanta, it's a whole weekend plus some. So if you have that as a foundation, you can build a lot around it. And I think that is a really special aspect about the sport that I wish more people understood and comprehended, is that the fans are really the driving factor behind this, and the drivers are the ones that are helping create the product.
Yeah, and from the one GRC event that I attended in Phoenix at one time, it was just it was hard to really follow or root for people, because it was just there weren't heroes that I could really easily see, and it wasn't like a very clear narrative that I could follow. But FD kind of has both of that fulfilled in my eyes. So there's definitely that fandom aspect that I think is much easier to latch onto.
It's we're in it for the long game, and so because of that, there aren't crazy up and down spikes, and because there aren't these dramatic up and down spikes after 15 seasons, a lot of the perspective could be that there's complacency, or that there isn't a lot of exciting new and things that are changing and all that kind of stuff. But I think we all and us internally as well have to step back and say, well no, this is that's actually an okay thing, that we're not having these crazy swings, and that we're starting to finally, not finally, but we're starting to fall into a rhythm, a stride that, look, we're going back to a lot of the same venues. We're doing these same things that are proven, but we have to enhance and improve upon them. And so, in your question is that I think the failure always, I'm just, my pet peeve sometimes is like, I see that there's a lot of potential in what we can do. And when we don't capture some of that potential, or aren't able to maximize what we see that could be better, whether it's in the way we're delivering content, or how we're helping market drivers, or whatever it is, I do see that sometimes as a failure. But I would counter that with, well, at least there's potential. And so that is a with a more positive outlook, is that there's still so much that can be done. And so we have to, then hone in and refocus our efforts to say, look, okay, there's so much more potential for us in the series, the drivers, et cetera. What more can be done, and kind of push and take advantage and find those opportunities and doing that. So yeah, I mean, I would say some of the stuff is more internal on our end to improve our processes and protocols and so forth, to ultimately deliver a better show to the fans. But I think there's so much, luckily there's so much more that we can deliver, that we can take advantage of.
Oh man,
Sam, we lost your audio.
Sorry,
There you
I muted it so I could answer the door. And one of our friends, Ryan, in the chat said, like, how are you going to capture the non-car audience? And that's a very complex question, of course. And I'm sure you've spent a lot of time and money to try to figure out how to capture new fans. But the dedicated ones are going to be there, I think, till the end of time, like me and Paco and Corey and a bunch of the diehards listen to the Driftcast. Like, we're obviously going to keep on watching as long as Formula Drift exists. But it's like, how do we get the new blood? Like, is it those inadvertent things that happen, like Fede's car catching on fire and being on the front page of every aggregate of even loosely automotive related things for months? And like, that's not something you can really plan for, but it's like, how do you get our content out to the bigger picture people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first was, what Ryan mentioned earlier, is that we have to be in unison and with one voice, ourselves, or the partners, the drivers that are involved in the series. I know I saw some, comments about, focusing on better, like, driver profiles and Pro 2 drivers and the like. Now,
that was our buddy. I just want to call him out real quick. That was Georgi Kalishnikov again with the YouTube super chat. So we appreciate it. But yeah, just talking about the driver profiles.
But it's a two-way relationship, right? It's a lot of times it's in the hands of the drivers. The platform is there. So yeah, yes, okay, fine. The driver profile, if we needed to add more, that's one part. But when we send the request out for information, you'd be surprised how many teams actively and proactively get information back, how active they are in terms of getting the updating us with content. I mean, we're all here to work together, and so I think it's not just about the non-automotive fans. I think there's still a ton of automotive fans and car enthusiasts that we can convert, that they think they're dead set, like I'm into rally, or I'm into off-road, and what you guys do I don't really like or care about. But I think there's a way to convert those, because they do understand cars and car culture and enthusiasm and motorsports and competition, and trying to get them. I think there's still so much of them to convert before we go after, oh, hey, you go to EDC and you love music, but let's show you some cars.
You like CrossFit.
Right. So I think there's a lot of that, and we're starting to see that. I mean, look at Hot Rod Magazine. That for the life of me, I would say 15 years ago, I would have never thought that Hot Rod would cover anything that I was into or I was involved with, and to have regular and multiple features in Hot Rod Magazine and in all the Mustang magazines. It's a big deal, and we're kind of chipping away at it and getting that audience who, they don't need to be diehard fans of drifting or of Formula Drift, but they need to appreciate what these drivers and these teams and what these car builders are doing to these cars, and be able to appreciate that. And I think if we can get them to appreciate that, it's a victory.
Definitely. Any other questions, Paco, Corey, or anything else you want to bring up, Jim, Ryan, before we do fan questions?
There's a lot of actually like very good fan questions on the Instagram. So
I just have one quick one, just
Corey.
real quick. You guys issued licenses to some of the Europeaners and their own series.
Europeaners? Okay.
Have you heard anything about people coming over, or are you guys expecting influx in new drivers this year?
I wouldn't say influx. We're trying to, these are the processes that I was talking about. We're trying to align with, our various drifting friends from around the world to make the bridge to transition here a little bit easier. But, like anything else, I think there is a lot of interest, and there are drivers out there that they have to secure the funding and the support, and look at, are they, building a car there and bringing it here? Are they working with somebody here to build the car? And then how do you transport it all, zigzagging across America and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, really right now, the hotbed, we saw, it was Japan, in the beginning of drifting, and the density and the drivers were coming out of Japan and were Japanese drivers. And then it was kind of there's an American era, the Tanner, Chris, Vaughns. But we're kind of in the era of the European driver. European drifting is really elevating the competition level. There is elevating. And so you're starting to see really hungry drivers come out of Europe. Will they make it over? We hope to see some of them, but we'll probably know probably more towards the beginning of the season.
Awesome. That was it for my half. You guys ready for to wrap her up with some Instagram questions?
Yeah, and Jim and Ryan, of course, we're going to talk to you one more time, hopefully before the 2019 season starts. But any other points you want to get across before we do fan questions?
One more time. No, we're good. We're ready.
Word. Let's hit them. Paco, Corey, you have any in the chamber there?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like right now, I think a hot topic. It's the electric cars. We saw a Tesla being disqualified from
That's so insane.
from Global Time Attack this weekend, and everybody's been talking about it. So we have Math the Hinge asking Tesla/electric cars in competitive drifting, for it or against it, and why?
I wouldn't say we're against it. I think we're already putting some regulations in place in case a team wanted to bring a electric car into the series. Kevin's been behind the scenes working on that and researching that. So I wouldn't say we're against it. I don't really know what happened at GTA that
they argued that electricity is not considered a fuel.
Mm-hmm. So anyways, the guy finished second place. He was on the podium, and then one of the chief stewards walked up and pulled him off the podium saying, hey, somebody protested you because electricity is not considered a fuel in the rulebook. And pulled him off the podium. He lost the second place.
It's really crazy. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
What when you say you're implementing, because I think we've talked about this in the show with you guys even in the past.
Well, we had other drivers saying that they would like to bring a Tesla.
Yeah, I'm not saying like full battery powered, but I'm saying like, what about electric assist? What do the rules stand right now with having a little power added versus with a battery or even a full battery powered? Where are we at right now?
Oh, from us.
Yeah, from you guys. Sorry.
I mean that's more of a Kevin question, but I mean, like I said, we were actually trying to. There's a couple guys that we're trying to test just to see how the vehicle works. I mean, even before how the power is generated and really just how the vehicle is set up. It's really about the safety of the vehicle, how we would handle on-track incidents. Are there, structurally is it different? I haven't really dug into and underneath a electric car, so I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I don't, like I said, we're not opposed to it. And so
yeah, from a
it's
founder's
really,
perspective, you wouldn't mind seeing the car
No,
just making
no.
a loud mechanical transmission whir with no other. I mean, it's going to make smoke and tire noise. So like I can see how like in grip sports, electric cars are kind of like weak because you don't hear as much. Yeah, and granted, like the dudes with Robo Race and all that, you hear the transmission with straight cut gears, which is still pretty cool sounding, but like not hearing engines kind of sucks. But with drifting, I don't really care. Like it's cool to hear the engines, yeah, but it's all about the noise of the drift that I care
right.
about.
And we wouldn't need to require like a siren because you're so quiet.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Yeah. Oh yeah, well, I think we'll definitely do another Kevin Wells nerd talk show in the off season here. So we'll definitely dive real deep into the future of that because sooner or later we will have something bringing.
It's happening.
You know.
I mean, they're definitely gonna be a thing. So might as well be prepared for it. I have another question from Alika80. FPV drone every round next year.
That's the plan. I mean, I think we are committed to going down that road, and unless there's some unforeseen circumstance or our planning changes, then we won't be committed to it. But our idea is to have that hopefully be part of the production going forward.
Once you start it, you can't take that away. People are gonna start crying if you take it away. It's so successful.
Yeah, that's a lesson that we've learned is that once you do something, you basically can't ever stop.
Right.
Oh, Formula Drift sucks now. They don't do that drone thing.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an honest problem if they didn't go back to it. I'm sure it was an instant conversation that the two of them had. It's like, well, we've opened up this can of worms.
Yep.
If you guys could have one driver back in, this is a little Richard Dinger hot dog flinger. If you guys could have one driver back in FD, who would it be?
I saw that. I think having I would debate between Daigo and Mad Mike, sheerly because of global popularity, and obviously they're good drivers as well.
I miss Mike. I want to see Mike in a non-Miata car.
What a new car.
And I mean, and then domestically, yeah, I'd love to see guys like Reese and Tanner back in. That'd be really interesting. But I would even venture to taking this window of opportunity. I would even venture to say, hey, there's the drivers out there that seem to be doing well, but I dare you to come here.
Dared.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And calling out.
Right? Well, who wouldn't love to see Calbada come and compete here? Let's just put it out there. Let's do that.
That's the truth.
There's rumors.
Yeah, well, I'm not really very excited. I know a lot of people get very fired up about this whole whose drivers are better thing. That's never really been our motivation. We don't really think about it like that. We think we want to put on the best possible foundation for drifting, and whoever wins, that's great. But I agree with Jim. I think I want to see all the drivers that are still currently actively drifting come back to the sport in their competition car of choice. So, Yokoi in his S15, Daigo in whatever car he thinks he's going to be best in, Kawabata absolutely in his GTR. And from my experience at DMEC this summer, there's a handful of guys over there that I would love to see them compete in their European cars because they are just so good. And as Jim said, and I think it's a point worth underlining, is that the Europeans have probably done the most to progress the sport on their side of things comparably to where Japan is right now. And they're doing an incredible job of developing drivers. So I'd really love to see some of those guys go over.
It was definitely really cool this past week. We finished our big Kia Forte build, the race service one, and then we had it debuted more or less in this video coming up with the Red Bull Drift Brothers, who were completely off my radar before this, honestly, but they are a big European phenomenon, and I know that they would definitely like to drive an FD, but like there's just such a good, thriving European scene that like I barely necessarily not even the position of doing this show every week. Like it's just a large community over there that is exploding and thriving. It's cool. I'd like to see a merging happen, and I know that a lot of those guys, their big goal dream is to compete in FD one day, and with the success of Team Wardhouse and all that, I think it's not unobtainable, and they can definitely show returns in doing so.
Yeah, Joe's got a license. He's welcome to come.
Yeah.
I mean, I would even, and the hard thing sometimes, I get it. It's about kind of raising funds and so forth. But for some of these international drivers, I mean, Pro 2 is really the great option. You don't have to commit to an 8-round season. There isn't a lot of logistics involved. You can come for a couple rounds. It's during Pro 2 weekend. It's the audience is there. You're at the venue. You're able to kind of dip your toe into how the series operates, the rules, regs, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Love to actually see some of those guys come for 1, 2, maybe 3 rounds, maybe all 4 rounds of Pro 2, and see how they do there in that environment before stepping into pro. There's like all those Polish guys in their E30s are freaking amazing. I'd love to see that come here. Ryan mentioned that. It's like those guys are on it. Like the driving there is pretty intense right now.
And you could argue that dominating Pro 2 would be a much better optic than placing in the bottom 16 in Pro 1. Like, I think it would be much cooler for me personally if I was kicking everyone's ass in Pro 2 than just kind of doing marginally in Pro 1. So if you're worried about not being considered to be in the big boy leagues, like that wouldn't be a concern to me, at least.
And Pro 2 is a great place in terms of where the current tire partners are. Is that in Pro 2 we have 2 tire partners, and so they can come in and get situated pretty easily. Where we all need to do more work, and what we're really trying is that in the Pro Series, I don't think we can expect to really get car count above 35 without bringing on some new tire manufacturers to support drivers that are coming from overseas, because the tire manufacturers that are in the series right now have invested a lot in their teams, and we can't expect them to continue to keep adding on teams without being able to be, over leveraged and have, too many guys that are supporting. And so, we talked about, GRC and, their issues with OEs and things like that. I think on our side of things, we have to get the word out to as many of the mid to upper tier tire manufacturers that it is truly a viable way to promote your product.
And that you guys aren't going anywhere. Like that's a big thing too. Is like you guys can show gains every year, and I can understand maybe during year 5 or year 10 of Formula Drift being like, well, I don't know, drifting might not be around, but it's 2015 or not 2015. The 15th season this year kind of shows like we're not going anywhere. Time to invest. Time to invest, motherfucker. Is that how you do it?
Show me the money.
Yeah, show me the money, dog.
We
got some more questions?
We have a question from Paul Velichkov. He actually super chat question from a little while ago. He asked, keeping the halftime show for the next year, Drift Dads, and he actually doubled down. Drift Dads, please evaluate the 2018 halftime show. Are we fired?
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul Velichkov.
Oh, without throwing too many jokes out there, I mean, yeah, I thought this goes back to the presentation of the sport. I think the halftime show was a great starter package. I mean, if anything, we under-resourced you guys in terms of being able to do what we want to do with the halftime show, but I think it was a really good starter package. Very informative. We always saw fans tuning in for it. So I think it's got a good foundation now. Hopefully, with the support of the brands that are already involved in it, we'll be able to continue to do that. And I'd love to do some more things with it. And also, we should chat with you guys to figure out, format wise, if we liked it, there's a way we can do better. What footage do we need to pull? What other things would be great to have in? Do we want to bring guests in, et cetera, all that fun stuff.
I want to go bigger, better, in your face. 2019 year of the Tiger.
If we could just get the fireworks show that you guys had at Irwindale for every round right before we went, would be probably a good start.
Say if we could do a 15-minute fireworks show, it'd be before the 15-minute halftime show.
Like before and after, because we have to celebrate that we also done.
And also maybe throughout, if you can give me some Roman candles that I can blast Paco in the belly with,
Oh.
that'd be okay. but yeah, I think I was really happy with the results by the end of the year. That my biggest complaint initially is that on our podcast here we talk about bukkake and really bad stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's
Pigeons.
like, we need to. It's easy to turn down. Like let's just say that on our podcast we're talking like at a 10 level of absurdity and silliness. It's like for the halftime show, it needs to be like a 5-ish. But like the first few, we turn it down to like 1. Like we're kind of indistinguishable from Ryan and Jared, which we don't need another Ryan and Jared because you guys do it so well. And I think by round 3 or 4, like we finally figured out that we finally figured out the proper voice to have is just we can have fun and I can call Paco Spanish Fred Durst
Twice,
and we can have that fun that Sports Center halftime pregame show sort of.
I think you need to talk to Chris about updating the graphics package. I'm sure something that incorporates flying SpaghettiOs and
Animation.
hot dogs probably work really well as their backdrop.
Well, we just need to get a Chef Boyardee sponsorship. I don't want to start giving free. I don't want to give any more publicity to spaghetti. Our fans been buying spaghetti tenfold. We have the numbers. It's in our deck. You can see that spaghetti sales have increased 100-fold across the United States, and we don't have a pasta sponsor yet. So until that happens, we're gonna kind of shut off that faucet.
We're still trying to get that Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. That's the other one. Gotta get it.
Any other hard-hitting questions here?
There's a question here that I don't know if it's a joke. I think it is, but might be serious. It says from Brian Harris 713. But in all seriousness, have you made a decision about Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s petition to run the 2019 Formula Drift season?
Is that a joke?
Did Dale Earnhardt Jr. coming to FD or what?
This is how rumors start.
That's how rumors start. I mean,
what about Dale Earnhardt Jr., i.e. Pat Gooden?
he did good. He did good as a crew member, but he's welcome back.
I heard he's coming back. So don't want to say much, but I've heard he's coming back.
Coming back to Formula Drift.
Good old Pat. Yep.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Dale Earnhardt Jr.
No,
I don't care about Pat.
Dale Earnhardt's never been in it, so he can't come back. But I think that'll be kind of cool. See, in all seriousness, kind of like when Tanner Faust came back to FD, he probably brought a little bit more of his TV show audience.
Well, I mean, if Dale Earnhardt Jr. came to Formula Drift, it would do incredible things for the sport.
Yeah.
And you should do it, Dale. I know he's listening right now.
Do it for Dale.
He's a big fan of the show.
Do it for Dale.
He usually tunes in, so thank you, Dale Jr. Hold on real quick. If Dale Sr. was the Intimidator and Pat Gooden is Dale Earnhardt Jr., what would we call him? Corey, you got this.
Oh boy.
Oof.
I would say the.
Huh?
I was gonna say the procrastinator for waiting to come back to the series, but
the instigator.
The instigator.
The instigator.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of an instigator.
Well, what about just the gator?
Or instigator. Like
the instant gator.
The instigator.
We're gonna
Florida.
have to work this one. This is too much to.
Because I was
put
thinking
on
more
us
of
in
like
short amount of time.
calling them the microphallus
We gotta work
or
this
something.
out. Micro, yeah, that's all right. All right, so Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the intimidator, and Dale Earnhardt Jr., aka Pat Gooden, is the microphallus, according to Corey.
Yeah, fix that. Awesome.
Any other questions for the Drift Dads?
I think
pretty much everything else we touched it already on the show, so everything should be answered.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for accommodating my dumbass travel schedule, and thank you for spending the time and talking about the sport that we all pour our lives and power and energy into. And awesome job on a 2018 season, my favorite Formula Drift season ever. Best drift events I've seen.
I agree.
It's only getting better, man. So,
thank you guys.
Thank you.
No, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. It's always fun.
Thanks, Papa.
Always a good time.
I don't know how to top off this year though. Like this was a pretty exciting end, so I don't know how we're gonna script this one for 19. So
2017 was probably my favorite year before that,
lower the
though.
bar a little bit.
it's getting better every year. And I mean, there's going to be more. This year was so light on controversy. Everyone was friendly to each other. Like there weren't really any big spats that I saw. There was no really crazy calls of people calling for the death of the sport and death threats against each other and saying that drifting is over. Everyone seemed pretty nice and pretty happy. And next year probably won't be the same. Like there's gonna be some shit go down at some point that everyone's gonna be upset about, and that's fine. It's all fine. We're here for high and low, so I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Purely unpredictable. There's you never know what's gonna happen until it happens.
I know.
Yep.
So we'll be there. We'll be talking about it, no doubt, with you guys. Thank you so much. Should we just end the show, or should we keep the dads on while we do our closing?
I heard Jim and Ryan do a very great duet.
Do they? We gotta thank sponsors real quick.
But before we go, let's just thank our sponsors. Thanks so much. AM Intakes being with us since almost day one, and they're one of the reasons why we're doing this.
Sponsor of
awesome.
many drivers in Formula Drift. Nexon Tires, one of the major tire sponsors in Formula Drift as well. Thank you for supporting this show, the halftime show, and of course Motegi Racing. They're making some sick ass wheels, including those awesome throwback wheels that Osbo was running in Irwindale, and Corey's wheels.
And finally, our Patreon.
Patreons. Thank you so much. We have to figure out what episode it is, but we are going to be doing a full Paco Spanish speaking episode. Jim and Ryan, I don't know if you're privy to this, but we reached a Patreon goal recently where we hit, I think, what is it, $200, and the goal reward was Paco has to speak Spanish for an entire show.
Yep.
And then Corey and I are going to translate.
So
it's
awesome.
It's going to go poorly.
Which
Paco and Jonathan Castro. That's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. No. Oh God, that would be a rough show.
That'll be a Spanish in stereo.
Oh God,
Yeah.
I don't know if we can have that. No, I'd rather have maybe you and Kristaps.
Oh boy. Well, Paco is Kristaps crew chief. Remember that?
I can totally talk like Kristaps too. But also we're gonna have the winner of the auction of the charity auction next episode. It's a surprise. He's gonna have a surprise next episode, I believe.
Oh man, let's do it.
Yeah, and we're going to have a surprise guest of his choice as well. So this was because of, for those who didn't know, Formula Drift organized a charity auction together with Lorette Nickel for support to support cancer. Support cancer? No, the opposite.
No.
To fight against
Support eradicating cancer.
eradicate cancer, that's right. So thanks Formula Drift. You guys, that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool thing to do, so.
We're going to uphold our end of the bargain and do a special show with the maximum bidder cast and maximum supporter of this charity. It sounds like next week. So we'll see you guys.
Yeah, we totally appreciate that. I think we pulled it together pretty last minute. A lot of people contributed, their effort and offerings and promoted it. And I think the last count, we still have a couple items that we're going to put up. There's a little glitch in the eBay system, but we're going to put that up hopefully before the holidays, and then it'll get us to our. I mean, I think right now I think we're at over 10,000, so we've given $10,000.
Awesome.
To the City of Hope, so that was a good thing, and we hope to continue to find good causes and good things to do throughout the year.
Awesome. Well, thank you for letting us be a part of that. And let's say good night. Thank you guys for coming on the show. Thanks, Paco. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Brian.
All right, guys.
Thanks guys.
Corey.
We'll see you later.
Hey,
See you,
guys.
Ryan, and see you, Jim. See you in Long Beach, or hopefully
Later,
sooner.
guys.
Later, guys.
Have a good night, everybody. Adios.
The end.